Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. But when ye come and all the flowers are floating, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, ye'll come and find the place where I'm lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. Hello everyone, how are you all doing today? Triple expansion engine to a destroyer hull. That's good. Right then, hello everyone, how are we all doing today? Ooh, my lights all got the flickering. Yeah. Do I need to blow my nose? Give me a second. I was hoping the singing might clear it. Oh god, those are bad noises for you to hear. Oh well. Hello everyone, how are you all doing today? Right then. I'm slightly better. I spent most of the day writing presentations. I now need to spend quite a large chunk of tomorrow recording stuff and sorting all stuff out. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Hello everyone. How are you all doing? How are you doing? Although I have to say, bear with me a second. Ba-da-da-da. Yeah-da-da-dee-dee-dee. Now, as you all know, I fundamentally have a sincere belief that if you don't have anything nice to say in this world, don't say anything at all. It's just easier that way. It just, makes life a lot easier if you just do it that way. Because doing it anything else doesn't really help anyone, and doesn't help yourself either. But sadly, some people do not share my view on the world. I don't mind, because most of the time they keep well away from me, which is probably good for them. But occasionally, a child comes into my world. Boriscatic 7910. Hello. I am sorry that you are quite so anti-British people, apparently. And I would hope not Aussies are all drunks, because I've actually got and met quite a lot of them. They're quite cool. You don't like my voice, you don't like my timbre, you don't like anything about me. So, in the spirit of goodwill to all men and women that is Christmas, let me give you some advice. If you are so upset and so don't enjoy a video, should this be the next one of mine you see, make this be your last. Click down, go to the button which says ignore this channel in the options, and click that, and save yourself this stress, because obviously, if you are so motivated to write such a complaint, it distresses you. And I do not wish to cause you such pain. I also say I do write bullet points. I don't write a script per se, but I write bullet points I'm going through. Just a small point. Just a small thing. But no. I don't like causing people this level of distress. And it seems to be really upsetting you. I do apologize. Not that much, though. I'm not going to change. But, you know, just, you can avoid it. That's the joy of YouTube. There are lots of different channels to go to. Go enjoy them. I love people to be subscribed to my channel. I'd love to have as many people subscribed to my channel as possible. I'd love to have 15,000 by Christmas Day, because then my mum would win the actual bet this year with my aunt. But leaving that to one side, which is physically impossible to get there, and frankly, seeing as all my Christmas plans have fallen apart because Mum was ill, then I was ill, and all that stuff, not going to happen. I still would prefer people, if they'd find it so distressing, to watch something else. Might I suggest, and I have found this recently on YouTube, I have found these recently, although I am still not quite sure why YouTube recommends so many random things to me. But I have found some absolutely great channels on model railway trains. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Oh, actually, no. Not even just model railway trains. Meet. Beard's Meat Food. Perhaps you'll enjoy him. He is genuinely funny. And he does great big food challenges. And frankly, I find him hilarious to watch and enjoy the sheer amount of food he can eat and still be stick thin. I mean, seriously. The man is frankly a mobile black hole for food. Okay? If you don't like me, you might like him. Please go consider it. There are options I can suggest. But, please. There you go. There's a British guy you might like. Anyway, today's topic. See, Clarke, I had the lurgy. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope it wasn't the same as mine. If it is, I can recommend a combination of... Well, I'm on about 18 pills a day at the moment to get this level of normal from me. I would say, and when I took this on, I thought it was an interesting idea to discuss with this class, because there are lots of classes which could conceivably go for that. And actually, there are even classes which precede the Flower class sloops of World War I that could go there. But the fact is, they do set some interesting precedents, and they do provide some interesting points of view to get through. So I thought, well, I've already done the Acacia class for the key ships, so that's given me some slides anyway. Before anyone complains who are watching this channel, I'm an academic. It's a well-known academic practice that if we produce the slides once, and then we have a similar topic come up that they are useful for, we will reuse our slides. We are institutionally taught to be lazy, and not to reinvent the wheel. And frankly, adjusting the slides is bloomin' easy. So, this is the point. This is a class which is quite, therefore was easier for me to approach, but also, they do have some good points there. And there are some points to think about as well, because a theme which I have been going into, and which HMS Diamond really, the key ships video that came out yesterday, did go into, is of course presence and deterrence and conflict management. And the fact is, sloops, when they start off, in terms of the mass production of sloops, are not really designed for that. But they become that role, because they are by definition quite useful for that role, and we'll get into that. honestly, it's, you know, on the PowerPoint thing, do have friends who insist on writing brand new PowerPoints for every single slide the presentation they ever give. And I looked at them and went, but you've taught that lecture 4 years in a row. Yes, and every year I've taught a completely different lecture. And don't take that the wrong way, but that's not exactly fair for the students. Because it means every year they're getting the same topic, they're getting pretty much the same questions and the same mark scheme, but they're getting a different lecture. Now, yes, upgrading your lectures to meet current standards and have current research in them and, you know, latest data, yeah, that's sensible. That's what you do. But changing the entire thing is kind of not being fair. And that's where the policy started out, the idea of using the same slides again and again. Now, I'm just going to quickly activate this again, because the easiest and quickest way for me to answer that point is this. Do this. If you go to the Wikipedia section, which does come from the book, which has all the naval history in, and they had to have a listed, you notice there were two pansies. There is a Flower-class corvette from World War II, which is transferred to the United States Navy, and it's renamed Heartsease before completion. But that's because they wanted to keep Pansy for the Royal Navy, because she was going to the USNS Courage, and Pansy has a bit of a historic name attached to it, and Arabis-class sloop, launched in 1916, sold in 1920. So she's the second batch. There you go. So yeah, there were pansies. The Royal Navy has had pansies. It's a name which has actually emerged before then, I think. So, today's topic. And as always, thank you to the patrons. Thank you to your support. I'm going to have the January vote go live soon, so we can have it done before January. And then I'm going to hopefully start getting caught up with things. It's been fun. It's been fun. Tomorrow, the long patrol for the gunnery, i.e. Patron 90, should come out. The long patrol for this video will come out on the 25th of December now. It's going to be the Christmas Day video. And the long patrol for Saturday's video is going to be the Boxing Day video, probably. It might end up being the Wednesday video, and it might be the next key aircraft video is the Boxing Day video, because the next key aircraft video is quite a cool one to look at. Just one. I, for one, wouldn't call anyone in Open Bridge in North Atlantic a pansy. Yeah, you know, as a rule, they didn't get looked down on. It's one of those things, shit naming, and it's worthwhile talking about for a couple of seconds, has a lot of various meanings. Being named for flowers anyway can be quite funny, but the Royal Navy often picks out flower names when they need to produce a large number of ships, because there's a large number of flowers. And because also, what do you need if you're talking about mass producing a ship? You need to be able to mass produce something which can have an instant character. Now, if we consider the plant, the pansy, it's a polychromatic, large-flowered hybrid plant. It's often quite a beautiful plant, and it can provide them with a lot of images. I don't know about you, but my mum loves having pansies in her garden. I am fairly competent at planting them. I'm not so competent looking after them, but the actual word itself comes from the French word pensée, which means thought. So this is why ships which are named Pansy often have some interesting designations and are described as thoughtful ships and beautiful ships. They have lots of good, nice imagery on them. And the thing is, again, if you pick of any flowers, you've automatically got something you can pick from to give a ship's badge. You've automatically got something you can give that the crew can unite themselves around. And they often do. They wear their name with pride because it's their ship. So, whatever other connotations those words might have, whatever slurs those words are used for, can also work in reverse. It gives them an esprit de corps. After all, how better to band a group together? You know, there's a whole song about a boy named Sue. Well, similar to this, if you want to make a band a crew together, you give them a name which everyone else is going to take the out of. So they either form together as one unit, strong, or they break. The odds are, if they're already a military force, especially a naval unit, or that's going to be spending a lot of time together at sea together, it's going to basically living with each other 24 hours a day, for however long they're at sea, they're going to form a firmer unit. And that goes into the naming scheme and the ideas. The Royal Navy has used flower names a lot over the years. For that reason. Often for smaller ships. Glad that Mark Harkness. Any photos of Sackville presentation? Well, she's flower class from World War II, not flower class from World War I. This is the after thing. The flower class from World War I is, in many ways, just as important as the flower class from World War II. I'm going to blow my nose again because I've got something blocked up there. Ooh. Thank you, chair. Sorry. Not sure why that decided to go down, but it did. I'll sort that out in a second. Ugh. Ah, that's better. That is a lot better. Oh. Right. Let's see if we can't fix that a tad. Yata-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's better. Yes, pretty much Paul showing. If you name a ship something like Pansy, the odds are, well, it's either going to collapse completely on its first mission, or it will end up trying to sail up the Rhine to punch a mustachioed man. That's the whole point. Now, shameless book plug. I do enjoy my shameless book plugs. And as you all know, there is a shameless reason I enjoy my shameless book plug. I'm hoping to get money from these books, the book selling, to help pay towards tax bill next year. Because, well, how do I put this politely? I'd really not to have it like that, not to have problems with the tax man. And last year, it turned out none of my university employers had paid any money towards my student loans, which they were supposed to. I'd ticked it on all of them, but they'd all forgotten. And that caused a little fine to come through, which I then had to deal with in January, unexpectedly. And I'd rather not be surprised again this year. So, we'll see. We'll see. Universities. I love to work for them. I love to teach the students. I just wish they were slightly more organised, the ones I work for. Just slightly more organised. Yeah, pretty much Night Signature, she was getting it from the beginning. From the get-go, she had the changes for those. But, I'd say again on the book, I hope you all enjoy the book. I like it. So, let's talk about an interesting thing, because small ships, the amount of times I will be told by people that fishery protection really shouldn't be part of the Royal Navy's duties, and a squadron should be got rid of and should be handed over to a Coast Guard. And I look at them and go, really? Yeah, it makes sense. Well, A, you're going to have to raise up in the UK's case a Coast Guard which has a whole lot of skills and operational abilities which it doesn't already have. So you're going to have to learn a load of separate training, a load of things. But also you're going to then delete a whole load of junior command posts for the Royal Navy. And a whole lot of training and experience for the Royal Navy in terms of command and operations. Because if you start to look around, those people who go and command those small vessels, they often do some of the best work and get to some of the most senior ranks in the Royal Navy because it's early command experience. And that matters. The thing is, what is the skill you learn when doing fishery protection? Well, let's be honest, fishery protection is all about presence. You don't really have enough ships to cover every square inch of ocean. You have to look like you're covering every square inch of ocean, though, to deter people doing illegal fishing. So it's maximising your presence for deterrence. You also have a fairly powerful ship in terms of what you're probably dealing with in terms of fishing vessels. But you'd actually prefer not to use it because technically you're doing a civilian task. And if you have to actually open up with the main weapons on a fishing boat, you're not. The people who look bad are not going to be the fishermen. There are going to be people asking, did you really have to bring them in body bags, or not bring them in at all? So you have to learn how to manage a situation and keep the conflict at the right sort of level, that you're able to achieve your goal without causing sufficient resistance that you have to actually use your power. Think about that. You have to achieve your goal. You have to maintain a certain threat level of your force, but actually arrange the situation and manage the situation in such a way you never have to use that force. Because the moment you use it, you're going to have problems. Now, if we then think about the wider conflict management, deterrence, presence, and conflict management, this is often done using forces which appear mismatched for the task. Because if you've got the case of a ship turning up, let's say, at a nation which is weaker than you, much weaker than you, you could well overpower them with any of your more powerful vessels. Sending an aircraft carrier, for example. Sending a battleship. This is a problem. You have to adjust your abilities to the situation. Now, traditionally, the British in the long 19th century, and it was a long 19th century, managed quite a lot of their conflicts by sending older ships. I.e. ships which had a reputation, but ships which were not the newest by the point they were being sent. So they're not Britain's best ships, most powerful ships, but they have enough of a status that people are going to listen to them. And, after all, they are British ships. So they do represent the wider fleet. The trick is also to be able to turn up when at the right time. Now that's the most difficult challenge. When is the right time to turn up? If you're managing conflict, when is the right time to turn up? A lot of people put their suggestions in the chat. When do they think the right time is to turn up when you're managing conflict? When do you think the right time is to show up? I could probably make it a... Let's see. Engage your audience. Let's start a poll. Let's see if the poll works. I like those polls. Oh, now it's asking me to log in. That's... There you go. Let's see what's happening. So far, this is good for me because I'm starting to work out how well I've been running these presentations by what the votes are that are coming in. Right, I'm going to give you until sort of another 10 seconds roughly to enter the poll. Anyone hasn't voted, please do vote now. There are... Someone keeps voting and then keep changing their vote. I can see someone... The system won't tell me who it is, but someone keeps changing their vote. Alright, I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll now. And let's wait till my hand catches up and I can actually see my hand doing this. Okay, let's wait. Ending poll. So, let's see what the votes are. We have 39% for You Never Left. That's a Toledo. As soon as possible, 25%. In Your Own Time, 21%. As scheduled, 14%. True answer, of course, is You Never Left. The idea, the real life best thing to try and manage conflict is to be a constant presence. Is to be someone that all the factions know and preferably turn to before the conflict even starts to break out to try and solve problems. Ideally, as a Navy, you never want to actually have to fight a battle if you can avoid it. You want to get the problem solved before the battle takes place. You want to stop the conflict before it breaks out. The trick of conflict management, true trick, is to prevent it breaking into a conflict in the first place. You want it to be a disagreement, you never want it to be a conflict. You want people to have a rivalry, you don't want them to have a war. Competition is healthy and good. Violence is bad for business. Violence is bad for economics. If you want a good example, we've got one currently going on. Okay? Conflict breaks out in the Middle East. I'm not getting into it. It's a land war. I'm not getting into that. But conflict has broken out in the Middle East. And now another group in the Middle East are deciding to show sympathy for one of the factions, one of the sides, by attacking international trade. Just causing everyone to have to send some ships there. That's bad conflict management. That is bad conflict. We are witnessing what happens when you have bad conflict management. And the reason you have bad conflict management is realistically, the major powers have all got badly balanced fleets. Fleets which they've cut to the bone, and therefore they can't do proper engagement. And this continues a legacy which is started by Jackie Fisher. Now, Why does Jackie Fisher start this? Because Jackie Fisher is a purist efficiency aficionado. And his idea of conflict management is all about media presentation. And that is important capability. That is a really good skill to have, and it really does matter. But media manipulation can only get you so far. You need engagement as well. I was asking, I'm not getting into the fact there are multiple conflicts going on in the Middle East. There are, but basically, one conflict went from a Cold War scenario to an absolute hot war. And it's got spiral effects. And other conflicts are feeding into it. Because the Middle East is a whole scenario for conflict management specialists. It really is. Those people who focus in on conflict management focus in on it. And will tell you that there are very, very, very unique issues in the Middle East. One of them is people are often hot and they don't have enough water. And human beings are notoriously grouchy when they are thirsty and hot. Now, pre-Jackie Fisher, as I've already mentioned, you had a lot of old ships wandering around the world. You had a lot of presence guaranteed by older vessels. Yes, there were also a wider maelstrom of various ships wandering around. He wanted to save money, so he got rid of those. Now, the thing is, they didn't just do the presence mission, they also provide the numbers, the depth of strength for the Royal Navy. The thing was, the Royal Navy has such vast numbers that yes, you can sink them, and you will probably sink their older ships. But the thing is, can you sink them fast enough? Can you sink all their ships fast enough that they don't sink you? I think, Albazaski, that is where you're falling into the mistake. You're thinking the fear rests on the individual ship. It's not the individual ship which matters when it comes to conflict management and engagement. It's the total of the fleet. And if you always show up with a one-size-fits-all solution because that's all you have, that actually creates more problems for you than anything else. You have to get out of the idea that you have to show up with the biggest, baddest ship on the block in order to get any respect or any attention, because you don't. That isn't it at all. It never has been. Remember, Jackie Fisher himself, when he is Commander-in-Chief of the Mediterranean, is pretty much the most powerful voice in the Mediterranean. His fleet dominates that sea. He dominates it from HMS Renown, which is by no means the most powerful ship in the Mediterranean, by any stretch of the imagination. Not even the most powerful in the Royal Navy. We have a legacy of the Cold War, a legacy of even to an extent, the framing of the naval treaties after World War I, which has given us a false perception on the value of ships, especially when it comes to conflict management and deterrence. This is something which is how do I put this? It's very difficult to quantify in a news article or a soundbite or in a way which is going to be satisfying to people who want hard data, who want me to be able to point to something and go, that makes the ship powerful. A ship is the value of all its parts, including its crew. But it also includes its flag. You can turn up with an LCS if you're prepared to present an LCS properly and have the same effect you desire. Because the thing is, you might the LCS might be the thing coming to visit you, but you know full well the next thing that can come and visit you is a Burke. And the thing that comes to visit after that is a carrier battle group. So the LCS has a 57mm gun. It has that thing. I would argue the problem for the LCS, in terms of their presence mission duties, is actually the way they were designed in the first place. They haven't been designed with the idea of doing the presence mission in mind, and as such they haven't got the necessary facilities they need to really be able to demonstrate and show themselves off. They haven't got it. It's one of the really interesting things that I have found looking at the Type 31s and the way they've been designed, the sheer obsession the Royal Navy's put into the galley space. And that was, for me, quite an... I was very happy to see that. And the thing is, the whole idea of a present ship and ships being presents is, yeah, they might get hit. They might get ambushed. But they do that, they're bringing on the wrath of the entire fleet to them. You know, America's quite famous. You attack their ships, they will come at you. They get very precious over their boats. Very precious over their boats. But, the thing is, that's not really the point. The point is that prior to Jackie Fisher, as so far a couple of people point out, the Royal Navy really was everywhere in the world at all times. And they were mostly there because they had the old ships. It meant they had the hull numbers. And it's probably usually cheaper to keep an old ship going, especially in a distant station, than it is to build a new ship for the role. As Dan Trim was pointing out, the ships Fisher scrapped were positioned for the role of global presence, while Fisher was creating a fleet to fight another battle fleet in the North Sea. You can argue that to an extent, but also there is a difference there, and I'll get onto the Fisher's metric in a second, because Fisher has a different approach to global presence, okay? So Fisher's reforms, now we often do concentrate on the battle fleet, we often concentrate on funding that. But he doesn't just fund the battle fleet. He doesn't just fund the battleship fleet, he also has the battle cruisers. He also has the battle cruisers. And his view is that if he can have those running around the world, showing up on a regular basis, because they're bigger, because they are therefore more valuable, their image will sustain more with less frequent engagement. So his view is that instead of you having a small ship visiting a port, let's say, every other month to say hello and show the flag, these would come round maybe once or twice a year. But because they're so much bigger, they have so much greater presence, they'd be more widely reported. And they'd have a wider impact. Now, battle cruiser being the operative word, yes. The two-word scenario. They're about presence. They're about you having strength, but you also showing it off. The trouble is, this actually misses a problem. In that, how usually you manage conflict was the Royal Navy would come and visit a place on a regular basis. There'd always be a ship turning up, as I said, every other month anyway. Sometimes more often, sometimes less often, but roughly about every 6 to 8 weeks. They would something would turn up and go, hello. The thing is, that gives you a bead on what's going on in the place, what the place is like. See a problem coming, talk to the local consul of the diplomatic service, says there's a problem coming. Okay, that we can deal with. Something bigger turns up. Might be the station flagship. Might be another big ship they have on the station. But something bigger than what normally turns up will turn up. It'll be the same routine visit. We always have a visit about this time. But it'll be something bigger. Something to remind everyone, oh, they have that too. And that's the trouble with the battle cruiser, because, for example, what Jackie Fisher is in many ways doing is trying to create a one-stop shop for his diplomatic needs. It doesn't work. That's why they end up also having a large number of light cruisers being built. It's an interesting thing. The Royal Navy starts building light cruisers almost at the same time. And many people look at that and go, but why is the Royal Navy doing this? And I go, well, it's quite simple. It's they're balancing in. Because whilst Jackie Fisher tries to put forward this argument, the other admirals are putting forward the argument you need more. And Fisher actually does eventually agree with this. Because he realizes that them visiting once or twice a year might have a bigger impact, but they're not going to be consistent enough for the level of engagement he needs. And that's where the town class cruisers, etc. come from. The idea of building so many cruisers. You don't need so many cruisers. You can only look at the German fleet, which was building the bare necessity for war. Look at the sheer numeracy difference between the sheer number of light cruisers the Royal Navy is building in the same time period as the Germans. Then at one point the Royal Navy is churning out as many light cruisers as the Americans, Germans, French, Italians, and Japanese combined. Think about that. And the Russians. You can add in the Russians as well in that year. The next 5 greatest naval powers, the Royal Navy is churning out as many light cruisers in a year as they are, combined. Why? It's because they need to rebuild the presence mission. And even then, they're not being able to visit enough. They can't have them visit enough. Now, the thing is, Nightingale has pointed out, you know, the present ship plan is light cruiser, protected cruiser, then armor cruiser, heavy cruiser, then battle cruiser. Not really. The armored cruisers start to become present ships as well. And that is to the extent what they had been used for. They had been made with the idea of being station flagships and distant station ships. And so they get sort of left in there, but they weren't really part of Fisher's original plan. And the reason they weren't is not because Fisher didn't value small ships. Because fundamentally, when it came to the Presence mission, he was looking at the big impact. And presence and conflict management is often about the cumulative effect. Let me explain. So let's say this. Let's say you have a big ship. It comes and visits once a year. But it gets you 100 points. But any month you don't visit, you drop down 5 points. So, first year you'll be 100 points and then you drop down 5 a month. Okay? By the end of the year, before next visit, you are down to 40 points. You've dropped 60. And that's without any other outside international relations or issues. And please note, this is me simplifying it massively, but it's okay it's good for the concept to get it. Now let's say you have a ship, smaller ships, which come visit every month, or every 6 weeks. So in 52 weeks of the year, they'll visit. Let's be nice. Let's say they'll visit 9 times. So there's going to be 9 weeks in the year when they don't visit. And, you know, roughly there's going to be about probably about 5 months when they don't, 3 months in a year when they don't actually turn up, when nothing turns up. So every sort of, if there's 9 times, roughly every 4 to 5 weeks they visit. So this we're not 3. Now again, it drops down by 5. But let's say every month they don't visit. But every month they do visit, it goes up by 10. Now they make 9 visits in the year. It goes up 90. Drops down by 3. Well, they're at 75. That's a smaller ship visiting more often. Now let's say you add those 2 ships together. You now have 10 months of the year you're visiting. You drop 10 points in that year. Because there are 2 months when you don't turn up. But you go up by 190, you finish at 180. Add in a middling rank vessel turning up twice in a year. Let's say that's 50. Let's say that's 50 points. Suddenly you're visiting every month of the year. You never drop any points, and you've gone up 290. Now, that's a very simple analogy. That is a very simple analogy. But it's all about trying to quantify and trying to value in what the meaning of presence is, what the value of presence is, what becoming part of the furniture of a region is. Visiting regularly, showing commitment. It's useful. Being part of the furniture. You see, the big ship turning up has unquestionably far more value in terms of impact than the smaller ships. But the thing is, the smaller ships cost a lot less. You can have them on station for longer. And also the thing about using the older ships for this was that they didn't really worry about wearing them out or not really upgrading them that often or taking them back for massive refits because they're older ships. They wear out. You replace them with other older ships that have also reached the point in which you don't care about them. And also, you're not asking them much. They're just pottering around. They might not do a high speed, they don't need to do it. Trouble is, Fisher gets rid of all these ships. And as said, he gets rid of them because of the big ships he's building, which have far greater value individually. Paul Fisher going, warfighting was not a priority. Put that nice little thing down there. Sorry. No. Because if you do conflict management right, you don't have to fight a war. And if you do fight a war, then those ships were not going to be what you were going to call upon anyway. And also, think about it from this perspective. If you're using your older ships for this duty rather than your newer ships, you don't wear out your older ships. Trying to do this mission, trying to do the presence mission with your war-fighting vessels, that's a problem. And Coronel is not a problem of the system. Coronel is a problem of, honestly, decisions made of the admirals back in the UK. And the Admiralty. There are some very, very strange decisions going on. But also, when instead of the ships being concentrated, where they were supposed to be concentrated on, someone had a bright idea of spreading them all about. But you didn't need to do that. You needed to concentrate them. If you consider, if just the armoured cruiser, the large armoured cruiser which was being sent to them, I think HMS Defence, had actually reached them, that could have changed the entirety of Coronel. Let alone if someone had gone, hang on, Von Spain's squadron is probably going that way, let's send a single battle cruiser. A single battle cruiser would have changed Coronel. Coronel is in many ways a fleet battle. It's not the primary fleets, it's the secondary fleets. It's the Asiatic squadron versus a squadron which was the South America division. Barely reinforced and not really properly supplied. I would argue, though, Craddock was still trying to do the best in the situation he was dealt. I think, look, defense would have made it so that I doubt that Von Spee would have tried to engage the fleet. I think he'd have withdrawn, because with 3 armoured cruisers quite visibly there, and Defence having the range of firepower Defence had, I think that would have caused von Spee to consider it better course of actions to avoid conflict. Probably would have caused him to withdraw up the coast of South America northwards. In which case, something else might have been sent out to back up Coronel, back up Craddock. If there is a single invincible class at Coronel, then I do not see the Germans winning that fight. Simply put, that they can't deal with that level of firepower. They're not designed to deal with that level of firepower. Von Spee's ships are good, and I've discussed them before, but they are not designed to take on a modern ship. They were designed with the flower of their technology when they were being built. I would add that today social media and media presence is just as important, but you need the visits as well. I don't think it's a substitution for a visit. I don't think it's a it helps in that way. But I would argue, I would really argue, that media and social media can magnify the effect of a visit. It can give you far more of an impact. And that matters. That is a useful thing to magnify your effect. So then we get to World War I. And honestly, Britain finds itself in trouble. Britain finds itself in trouble because normally it relies for small vessels on calling up a load of trawlers, and that is what they normally do. But the trouble is, the size of the average trawler in 1915 is not as big as it is in World War II. And they actually grow between the wars. And the other problem they have is that converted trawlers are not as necessarily viable for the missions they need them to do. Because what you need to do as a merchant, as a protection of a ship, is escort them. Now, interestingly enough, the first surge in construction, the Royal Navy pushing through, are for minesweepers. Why are they going for a naval merchant hull for minesweepers? Why are they not using trawlers? Why? Because they actually want to make them a little bit more survivable. They don't expect their ship to survive, but they want to do it so that the crew has a chance of surviving. I guess the 50 pre-dreadnoughts would have been without World War I and Naval arms race would have been the overseas present ships after the ironclads go. A few of them probably would have been. Lord Nelson and Agamemnon, they could well have found themselves on a distant station. Now, this is one of the things that the Royal Navy is dealing with. One of the things often misunderstood about World War One, especially the submarine threat in World War One versus World War Two, is that in many ways the mines were more of a problem than torpedoes. Mines were far more of an issue than torpedoes. Portugal, were the Flower class sloops built to a naval merchant standard? They were built to a fusion. And I once had an interesting conversation with someone who said, well, HMS Ocean, the LPH, was built to merchant vessels, merchant ship standards. I went, no, she's built to modified merchant ship standards. She was built to an extent to merchant ship standards to save costs where applicable and viable, but there are some naval standards used in her construction and build. That was partially because she was perceived as a landing platform helicopter whose primary role was the reinforcement of, well, the transfer of the 3rd Commando Brigade and their supporting units of helicopters, etc., to Norway in the event of the Cold War suddenly becoming hot. Well, the idea was that she wouldn't survive that long, so frankly, you didn't have to worry about it. I can understand that. I really can. But the trouble is, the real trouble is that it's not the same as producing a vessel to merchant standards. And it's the same with the Flower class sloops. They are produced to naval, what I would describe as navalized merchant standards. They are built to a level at which they have the capabilities to do the job they need to do. Now, the Royal Navy in World War One build the Acacia class, 24 vessels, the Azalea class, 12 vessels, the Arabesque class, 36 vessels. They are built primarily as fleet minesweepers. Of those, there's a further 8 of the Arabesque class are built for the French. The Royal Navy loses 9, and the French lose 1. Plus, Geshin and Myrtle were lost to mines in July 1919 in the Baltic. So, that is 80 vessels built. Obreta class sloop and the Ancusa class sloops of 12 and 28 vessels respectively, the 48 vessels, are built as anti-submarine sloops to an extent, and actually and the first Q ships that eventually turned into just full-time escorts, because after a while Q ships stopped working, so they just went with convoy escorts. And so you had roughly 112 vessels built for the Royal Navy, 8 built for France. The Royal Navy, of their 112 vessels, lost 17. The French lost 1. So, of 120, 102 survived World War One, and 2 more were lost soon after, meaning 100 realistically survived. Now, these vessels were built to respond to the threat they were managing at the time. Starts off with being mines as the primary threat. Then they go with the Q ships once they get to the point at which submarines, torpedoes and submarine attacks are becoming more a threat. And eventually all those vessels are being used as escorts because they're all cheap, cheerful, and can carry enough firepower to do the job. Enough firepower to do the job. If we think about what that means, in the case of the Acacia class, that's usually roughly 2 12-pounders and 2 3-pounders, but multiple other weapons were added on occasion. The Azela class, well, they would have up to 2 quick-firing 4-inch or 4.7-inch guns, and 2 3-pounders. The Arabis class, 2 4.7-inch guns and 2 3-pounders, but as said, for all these vessels, weaponry might vary depending on who decided to modify them. The Abrita class were supposed to mount 3 12-pounder guns and 2 3-pounder guns, but very quickly ended up carrying 2 4-inch guns and some 3-pounders and depth charge throwers. And the Anchusa class, well, they were designed to mount a couple of 12-pounders, a 7.5-inch howitzer or a 200-pound stick bomb howitzer, and 4 depth charge throwers, but as they were built would often have a couple of 4-inch guns, 2 12-pounder guns, and some depth charge throwers. So, they have capabilities. They're flexible, but no one's really going to call those a first-class warship. They're some of the most effective ships built, but no one's really going to call this a first-class warship. And that's the point, really. They don't have to be. I think one of the problems we have, especially today, and one of the reasons that this class becomes quite so interesting, is the modern obsession with making things always have to be first-class ships. It's got to be a first rate. And the question you've got to ask is, what is its mission profile? Not what is its maximal threat vector, but what's its mission profile? What are you going to call upon the ship to do? The thing is, the Acacia class, this class could find themselves in a big battle. What would they be doing in that battle? Would they be trying to lead the battle? Or would they be trying to support the other vessels leading the battle? Would they be a picket ship? Would they be a core ship? Or would they be a task group ship in a fleet action? In a presence mission, would they be the major presence or would they be the regular visitor? In an anti-submarine warfare mission, are they a valuable enough vessel to make them a primary target for a submarine, or are they something the submarine would prefer to avoid rather than engage because even if they win the battle, they've lost? that's a question for you all to think about, and also maybe respond in the chat. And I would argue that it is a conceit and advantage of a major navy to actually be able to think of things in this way, but it's also how they have to think about things. Because a major navy is never truly at peace. Did they do ramming attacks against subs? Yep. That was part of the doctrine, was to ram a submarine. It's not just HMS Dreadnought going out there trying to ram people. The actual anti-submarine ships were trying to do it as well. So is it a task group ship? Is it a picket ship? Is it a core ship? What is it? What is it? Lions are going with picket ship. Any others? Poll. Okay, I'll do a poll. Alright, I will do a poll. There we go. There you go. I haven't linked in because I thought it might give it away too much, because I think that their presence mission is far too easy to work out. Whether they are picket ships, core ships, or task group ships. Where are the poodle and the corgi? Currently in the house. They're getting far too... They're getting a bit... Since I've been ill, they've been getting a bit more possessive over me. In that they both like to come... when I was really not well, and I was actually lying in bed at one point, because basically walking around, I was just coughing and sneezing the whole time, and it just wasn't good. So I basically lied down, because that was the point where I was best. They were both lying on top of me. And... they took it in turns as to which should smother my head and which should smother my legs. It's always fun that, you know, you're not feeling well and you sort of go, I have got a poodle wrapped around my head. Or I have got a corgi wrapped around my head. It's supposed to be blue with white writing on it. Richard's the poll. Are we expecting a normal stream or a short stream? It's a normal stream in that it should go on for about 2 to 3 hours. I'm not sure if I would do Discord tonight. I will probably try and do Discord Saturday night. And then there will be the Christmas Eve brew ships where I will answer quick Q&A. Which will also probably be a long one. But at the moment I'm trying to save my energy for those two on the weekend, so tonight will probably not go too late. Oh, it's a very even contest going on between two of them. Very even contest. That's right. Am I right that yeah, HMS Enterprise was also going to be finished. There was some debate, but most of the debate was coming from the Treasury, not the Navy, over whether or not she was going to be finished. The real debate in terms of Navy was over the third of the E-class. And the trouble is sometimes that gets transferred over to HMS Enterprise because it's almost a case of they almost forget that Euphrates existed. It's one of those things. Euphrates gets forgotten almost completely. Markuch, well, the trouble is, I will get into it. There's a sort of limited number of sort of space soon, but if you were in a convoy role, the principal warfighters are the core ship instead of principal warfighters is your merchant ships. So yeah. Right then. I'm going to end the poll, so you've got another couple minutes to vote. Well, not another couple minutes, until I reach 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, poll end. I'm just watching me do that, and then I will end the poll. Poll has ended. So, task group security has got 47%, Picket has got 43%, and core ship has got 7%. Well, they're not going to be principal warfighters. Interesting enough, Picket we normally be considering destroyers and light cruisers. In this era, we'd be talking about destroyers and light cruisers. And honestly, we'd be talking about those in later wars as well. So, this is a task group security ship. It is a vessel which adds its firepower to the task group for extra security. It will do the anti-submarine warfare operations against any vessels, any submarines which get too close to the task group. It will engage them. But it's not there to engage other surface ships. It's not there to deal with other threats. It's got a specific threat role. It's dealing with mines, it's dealing with submarines. Yes, if small surface ships get annoying and get in there, it can bash at them. But it hasn't got much of a chance. I'm not sure what the other 3% are. I don't know, Peter Dawson, I'm not really sure. Do you reckon, when we were in Mo, we had a pair of well-disciplined German Shepherds. Being sick meant you had both of them cut up against you, and if you pushed them off, they whined. Yeah. Now, the thing is, the definition of a picket is it's got to be able to respond to what it's got to be have a good chance to respond to all threats, so it can survive being a picket. This cannot really survive being a picket. If a surface, it can't run from a surface ship. It can't run from a surface threat, really. You know, its top speed was supposed to be 17 knots. They were found to be slightly under power for that, some of the original ones. So this is a small issue. It's not designed for high speed. It's not designed to fight really a lot of threats. But what it can fight well. And that's basically the point. That's its purpose. To be able to fight some things very well. It's a specialist. But it's also fine for a presence mission, because let's be honest, 76mm, that's fine for an ongoing presence mission, just turning up. Can deal with most pirates. Can deal with most fishery protection issues. It can deal with most problems. It can fire a little boom when it needs to fire a little boom, which can make most people go, "Oh, I don't want another little boom on closer to me." Hey Doc, moment please. When firing those deck guns, do they fire them on the up roll, or how does it work? Well, to be honest, it's going to depend where they're aiming on the hull and at what ranges they're aiming. If they're trying to get the maximum range shot, firing on firing when they're sort of tilted over gives them slightly higher angles. When they're sort of going down rather than when they're going necessarily up. So they'll try and fire when they're sort of giving it a higher angle and a boost rather than when they're lower. But if they are trying to hull the vessel closer in, they might well wait till they're firing downwards. Also, you have to consider the rate of fire. These are quick firing guns, which means 12 or more rounds a minute. And let's be honest, the 76mm, that can achieve a fairly decent rate of fire. In fact, oh good lord, rate of fire was usually 20 rounds a minute for a 12-pounder. 1800 weight gun. And they were fitted to Dreadnought, King George Edward VII class, Lord Nelson class, and Minotaur class, plus other vessels. Even the 1200 weight gun, which was fitted to pretty much everything, including some destroyers, etc., that was And there's still one surviving at the Museum of Naval Firepower, which is at, well, it's at Gosport. It's worth a visit. I always enjoy that one. Anyway, that one had a rate of fire of roughly 15 rounds per minute. Basically, they can be as rapid firing as the gun crew can achieve with them. The better, more gun crew works, the better they can get, because most of these guns do depend upon their crew. Is there a modern HMS Enterprise in the Royal Navy? There is. She's a sister of HMS Echo, and she's one of the survey vessels. Their stability was about as good as the World War II Flower class. Arguably slightly better to an extent considering they're 1,200 tons, but they're roughly the same. There's really not a lot of difference between the two classes. It's another thing is that sort of the Flower class of World War I establish almost the pattern, and the sloop construction projects of the 1920s and 30s build upon that pattern and develop the template, and then the template's adapted to Black Swan class sloops, the Flower class corvettes, and the Hunt class escort destroyers, and eventually the River class frigates. There really are quite a few number of ships in the class, and it's kind of interesting their names they were chose, because again they have meanings. Acacia, Anemone, Aster, Bluebell, Daffodil, Dahlia, Daphne, Foxglove, Hollyhock, Honeysuckle, Iris, Jackquill, Labrum, Larkspur, Lavender, Lilac, Lily, Magnolia, Mallow, Marigold, Mimosa, Primrose, Sunflower, and Veronica. Let's be honest, HMS Primrose? HMS Sunflower? I know we were having great fun talking about HMS Pansy earlier on, but HMS Lily? I don't know, none of those names really scream, "We're hard," do they? They don't. They're not scary names. I was having this conversation with people recently going, oh yeah, warships should all be named things like Death Seeker and this, that, and no. Honestly, you don't necessarily want them to have those sorts of names. War Sprite is a very good name. It comes from War Sprite, and it basically means War Spirit. That's a fine name to have. Yes, we all know the reputation of War Sprites as going off and biting off more than they can chew and doing donuts in front of, the high seas fleet of children and all sorts of sort of things. But the reality is, they have more of a culture than that. Now, to answer a quick question, yes, some of the World War I class did serve into World War II. I did. There's about 2 of these which end up in World War II. There was an entire question about what happens if more ended up in World War II. I did a key ships on these vessels not that long ago. So sorry, I think there have been too many lives. I didn't realise there were one. There'll be another on Saturday and another on Sunday. I'm making up for the fact that I missed so many lives while I was ill, and because I do apologise for that. I do feel bad when I miss lives. And let's be honest, HMS Foxglove? I love the name, and I know how experienced that ship is. You know, one of the interesting things about HMS Foxglove, if we sort of look at it, she has a very, very interesting career. She's in service till 1946. She is dive bombed and damaged by German aircraft at the Isle of Wight in July 1940, but she stays afloat. HMS Foxglove. There you go. Here she is. She'll serve not just through World War I, not just through the interwar years, where she spends most of her life on the China station, doing all sorts of interesting duties there, but she'll serve into World War II, and she'll survive being dive bombed. One of the interesting things is the amount of people who turn around and go, well, dive bombers was such a threat. Any ship they hit gets sunk, and I'm sort of sitting there going, well, here you go. Here's a good example of one that doesn't. There are a few others. She is so damaged that the Royal Navy looks at her and goes, is she worthwhile our cost of repairing? They decide no, because they've got a flag-class corvettes and everything else coming in, so they convert her to an accommodation ship and base ship, becoming the harbour guard ship in 1941 at Londonderry. But, you know, the fact is, she was able to be repaired. It's just it was decided that, frankly, it wasn't worth the cost. Larkspur doesn't have a good ring to it. I do admit that. Let's be honest. Flower class names actually have a good ring to them in a way, and I would... My hope is that when the Royal Navy commissions a class of uncrewed... loyal kayaks or whatever they want to call them, they give them the flower class names. The Enterprise was decommissioned in 2022. Yeah, I just remember that one. She was Echo's sister, but we don't have one now, do we? Enterprise. Was she decommissioned? H88. She was decommissioned in March 2023. Sure, she was decommissioned March this year. So we don't have one, but it's only as of March 2023. And her motto was Hope, License, Difficulties. Spare, aspera, lavat. Built by Appledore. Although Echo was decommissioned in 2022, is still awaiting disposal, and Enterprise is interesting in that she was decommissioned in March 2023, but hasn't moved. In terms of the Flower class from World War One, you will actually find there is one sitting around. It's HMS Saxifrage, aka called HMS President. There's a whole thing going to try and keep it alive It's one of the and Chooser class sloops. So that's the last. It's the last one surviving of those. I'm not sure if there are any others surviving from memory. I don't think there are. I think she's the only one survived. I'm not sure. Chrysanthemum is still around, I think. But no, she was scrapped in 1995. So Saxifrage is probably it. There's all sorts of interesting things going on about her, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah. The point I'm making about dive bombing is that, frankly, sometimes it all depends on where you're hit. Okay? A number of destroyers were one-shotted by dive bombers, and people go, well, that shows how weak they were. But if you're hit in this space, this is on the sloop or on a destroyer, if you were managed to be hit in the engine and boiler space, which is basically a huge space in the center of the hull, then the ship has a lot less there to be able to contain and deal with the explosion than being hit at either end. So if they manage to hit them dead in the center, in their weakest space, they tend to get sunk. If they hit them at either ends, they can survive. Yeah, that was HMS President, the old black one, a black and yellowish hull, I think it was, on Thames. But now it's been moved to be dry docked and these all sorts of things. There's also HQS Wellington on the Thames, which is a Halcyon class minesweeping sloop from World War II era, which is the white ship. And I used to love taking my students down there when I was one of the things when I was teaching at King's. I'd take them down, take them on board, and I was allowed to take them on board. It was a fun thing for me to take them to do. Laburnum. Now the thing is about this class, the really interesting thing, is often people point to them and go, they are the first time we mass produce a naval class. Look at us, we're building 120 ships. This shows mass production of minor escorts and smaller escorts is viable. Mass production during wartime. So this demonstrates also that you don't need to do them in peacetime. You can just order an emergency build in wartime. And that's arguably not wrong, but it's also not right. For starters, it wasn't the first time it had been done. If you look at the gunboat construction during the Crimean War, I would argue that ordering that many gunboats in the 1860s to be built is kind of far more impressive in that period, because there is a lot less standardization. It's a lot more difficult. The fact that the Royal Navy achieves the level of standardization and construction it does is amazing. Then we have a few other vessels at various points. The point is, wielding maritime infrastructure is as much a part of conflict management as it is a part of deterrence, having the ability to do it. going to sound strange, but the infrastructure actually is. It's easier to repair than it is to build. It's easier to maintain than it is to create. Having it makes the ability to create, to turn from theory or raw materials and money into reality a viable prospect. I would argue, therefore, that the Flower class, both in World War I and World War II, whether sloops or corvettes, really are a demonstration of industrial intent. When you couple them with the Hunt class escort destroyers in World War II, and the other things being mass-produced, it's basically Britain going to Germany, you are not going to win this war. We are going to outbuild you. They've been doing it with dreadnoughts, they've been doing it with light cruisers, by golly, they'll do it with escorts as well. And they do. You know, it's one of those things which isn't looked at as a bit of a turning as a bit of a turning point in World War One. But let's be honest, for the German High Command, realizing the Royal Navy can turn around and produce and crew 120 120 escorts, 120 vessels, and have them in service built within a year. You know, in an 18-month time period, you pretty much build most of these vessels are built. That's got to be kind of scary. Yeah, people think the Americans are coming, and that's a big impact. But let's be honest, this is a visible impact. You're sinking everything you can into submarines. Looking at how long it's taking you to build up your submarine strength, to deploy your submarine strength, to make use of your submarine strength. And the Royal Navy just turns around and goes, bzzz, and they're built. Crewed and on duty. And what's the German response in the meantime? This is an interesting problem to consider when we talk about Germany, because Germany is often considered a very strong power. Very industrial power, they have a large population, they have a large industrial base. And then you look at actually what that industry tends to deliver in wartime, and you realise they have some structural weaknesses. One of those is the ability to get the raw materials they need, in the qualities and quantities they need. And that is what makes them quite so susceptible to that traditional British action of blockade. In contrast to the British, the important thing is to keep that trade flowing. And they do whatever's necessary to do so. They would make a deal with the devil themselves, if that was necessary. I swear. We're on 30 minutes behind, 90s techno starts playing. You'll get there. You'll get there. Now, this is HMS Veronica in the interwar years. She's being a present ship. She's actually being part of New Zealand and part of the creation of the New Zealand Navy. And this is where these vessels really start to come in useful, because the thing is, the Royal Navy had been short of ships to do that basic low-level constant presence mission, and to also be the starting vessel, the nascent vessel, for the wider fleet. For the fleets of nations like New Zealand, Australia, India, South Africa, Canada. The dominions which are coming, the capabilities that they are growing, the allies they need for future conflicts in order to be able to defend the Empire. Well, Lions, to a certain perspective, we certainly are, but, you know, I would refrain from using that phraseology myself. Excuse me, there's a reason I'm eating while live, and there's a reason I am just about to take a drink. It's because I'm having to have pills again. And therefore, one of the things I have to do when I'm taking a lot of pills is I have to remember to eat. If I forget to eat, I have a habit of making myself ill with my pills. So, that is why I'm eating. I know I don't usually like to eat too much while live, because I don't want you all to see a cement mixer. Try and make sure I keep my mouth closed. But I have to eat with the pills. And I know I'm eating after 8 minutes, rather than anything more serious, but that's because I've run out of fruitcake. And I neither have time to cook myself 3 meals a day, nor the money to keep order takeaways 3 meals a day. So, chocolates are it. I had a lunch. I might get something more for dinner later, I'm not sure. And just to confirm what I did say earlier, this is brought to you by a combination of 18 pills a day at the moment. Of which some of those are painkillers. The reason they're painkillers is apparently I managed to cough so much I hurt myself. Which I only found out when I took my mum to another medical appointment, and the doctor who was checking up on her would turn around to me and went, "Why are you wincing when you're coughing?" And I went, "Well, you know, I was told to take some paracetamol or something. I'm already taking that for, you know, because paracetamol is part of the Lemsip stuff which I take for my cold." And I went, "Have you managed to bruise your own ribs coughing that much?" I went, "Potentially. I've had it happen to me before. So now I'm on something slightly stronger." Points, it's still 2 less than I take every day. Glad to hear it. You and I are both rattling around. I am not stealing my fluffy research assistant's treats and get killed. How senior commander were those of Flower class? Usually they're lieutenant commander or commander rank. It will depend, but usually not very senior at all. Not very senior at all. So it's a good early experience. And if you consider it's early experience in the cruiser role. Think about that, because you have the destroyers, which produce your very high energy, very capable, very aggressive commanding officers. That often go on to senior commands because they have this command rank at a young age. And they have this command experience at a young age. Well, if you consider corvettes, and well, sloops as it were at this point, sloops they're sailing around, they are another posting for a relatively junior officer. I'm going to blow my nose again. At least I'm coughing less now. Right. What you don't know is also I have a little station set up here with some paper towels, a bin for the paper towels, and all the things I need to clean my hands and nose before I come back to you again. Yeah. Do apologise for that. Any famous flat? There's a few who got through, but not that many. It's going to sound strange, but again, they often go on to become cruiser officers, but also they become, in terms of sloop specialists. The sloops actually, as time goes on in the 1920s and 30s, they become the places where you find the minesweeper specialists, the mine warfare specialists, and the anti-submarine warfare specialists. So, for example, well, when we start thinking of World War II, and we start thinking of, well, let's see. Oh God, Lord, brain engage. Freddie Walker. He is very much a sloop officer. Very, very much a sloop officer. When you sort of look at his career, his history, what he served in, he is very much, in terms of the Royal Navy and in terms of his service, sloops. If I can just find his list, I have it somewhere. Right. He had, prior to HMS Starling, had commanded HMS Stork, and prior to that, he'd been on other sloops. You know, he's a sloop specialist. And one of the things the Royal Navy did in interwar years was build up certain specialisms in certain areas. So when we're talking about sloops, we're talking about anti-submarine warfare. And we're talking about, you know, if the sloops are in with the home fleet or Mediterranean fleet, they're going to focus in on ASW. If they're on distant stations, they're basically focusing in on diplomacy, on presence. When you're planning part 2 of the Synop video, it will probably be in the new year at some point. In the new year, I will add in part 2 of the Synop video, and probably start again from it with it actually, and just do it a second attempt. But it'll be, you know, it'll be when I'm fairly certain I can complete it, if that makes sense. So, probably in the sloops we're talking about Freddie Walker. I have to admit, as being the most famous officer to come from them, but there are a few others. There are a few others who have their careers and sort of begin them off as sloops. Quite a lot of the cruiser admirals did some time in sloops as well as destroyers. Sorry. YouTube has just flashed up some sort of advice for me, you know. Should put in an advert right about now, insert an ad. Should talk about memberships now, apparently. Should talk about the importance of memberships now. It's just all flashed up on the side of the screen, so I'm just reading through it, the advice that's sort of come up as I just wondered why it was flashing at me, and it's all these messages. Importance of memberships. How memberships build value for a community. Cute. I knew that one. What's the next one? Memberships in the logarithm. Ah, cute. It's all a load of adverts. Oh, well, and nice way. This is the thing, is YouTube reminds you and goes, da-da-da-da, and then put this in there, sort of going, I'm in the middle of talking about ship design. There is no way to talk that in. I don't know. But the thing is, they're doing this all next to ones which are, you should also advertise your shorts and make your shorts stand out, and all the shorts they're showing are people doing hair and makeup. Now, I might need hair and makeup. I would argue that, frankly, having looked at my face for the best part of not quite 40 years, but definitely the best chunk of 40 years, I know how bad this feature is. I know this visage is not wonderful, but my skills with hair and makeup basically results down to camouflage paint and putting on stuff which is to break up my outline and my shaping of my face. Not really proper makeup. Although apparently, according to this, if I make a hair and makeup tutorial, a lot of you will watch it. So apparently I need to get some camo, some of my camo gear out and, you know, show you all how to do camouflage. Break out the outline of your face. Oh. Sorry. I should not get distracted by YouTube. Point is, how many former naval officers went out into diplomatic service? Again, a rather large number, because again, they're often recruited by the diplomatic service because they could already speak languages, and they could work well together. And they knew the areas they were going to. If the British had kept up sloop production and spread it throughout the Empire, would they have bothered World War II Flower class with the sheer numbers they could have built? That is an interesting question, which I have discussed before in several ways, and I honestly think if they kept up a production of 8+ sloops a year for the 1920s and 30s, I am honestly of a question as whether they need the World War II Flower class corvettes. I'm sorry I made you spit out your Coke, HMS Bernard. I was just saying what YouTube is advertising to me. There was a patch on the screen, because what I have is... I'm not sure I'm showing the screen, but I have my screens divided into 4. So I have the studio bit over there. Then I have the OBS section here. Then I have the chat here. And then I have the other studio section over there. So I have the studio which is managing the stream section here, and the channel studio over there. So I can see all 4. And I can watch all 4. And can I do? I can basically show you what was flashing up at me. Because it does flash up at you. Yeah, da 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 da. There we go. There you see subscribers, and this was flashing at me. And as you can see, this is what I was sort of the instructions I was reading, the things I was reading through, and the ideas I was reading through. As you can see, makeup tutorials. Yeah, that's a suggestion for me. Honestly, I will say, with the TV work I've done, I have in that all that time once had makeup applied, and it was literally the person went, the producer who I knew quite well looked at me and said, "Alex, I know you're a functioning insomniac. When was the last time you slept?" And I went, "Honestly, I didn't sleep last night." She went, "Right, I'm going to cover up some of the things under the bags under your eyes a bit, because frankly, we're just going to cover it up because the camera will make it look worse." And that's the only time anyone's ever done anything to me. Sailors put on makeup in the age of sail? Goodness gracious me. Saltwater was going to get rid of that. Basically, if the Royal Navy goes into World War II with enough escorts already in place, and let's be honest, the various sections of the treaty meant you could have been building escorts all those years, the Royal Navy would have been in a very different situation. As it was, what happens is they're resting on a lot of their World War I sloops. And in the 1920s, they start to build new ones. 1920, end of the 1920s, they start building, but they're not really building in consistent numbers. One of the interesting things once you start going into the Royal Navy sloops, in terms of, you know, the Royal Navy ships, in 1921, the Royal Indian Navy commissioned the two Cornwallis class, which included HMIS Pansy. The Royal Indian Navy's HMIS Pansy. This was a former Flower class sloop that would serve with the Royal Indian Navy until, well, it was put in service with the Calcutta Port Authority, and then would be requisitioned by the Royal Indian Navy in 1939 and returned to their owner, the Calcutta Port Authority, in 1946. That is HMIS Pansy. So that's why the Royal Navy don't have the sort of arguing about whether or not to have a Pansy in service in World War II. As I said, they are deciding to save it for one of their own ships, but also there's the fact that there is already a Pansy, which is the Her Majesty's Indian ship Pansy, which was the World War I one. And there's HMAS Cornwallis, which had originally been Lishness. And by the way, if you go and look through the Royal Indian Navy, Royal Indian Navy and Royal Indian Navy Naval Reserve and Volunteer Reserve and some of the names in them, they are some really interesting names. There is a gentleman whose name is quite possibly Russian, who turns up in the Indian Royal Navy as one of their senior officers. There are also the 24 class, which were 24 sloops built towards the end of World War One, of which there are 3 still in service. Bridgewater class, Folkestone class, Shelter, which were built, 1929 is when they started building sloops again. It's the Bridgewater class are the first 2. Then there's the Folkestone class, which are next 5. Then there's the Shoreham class, which are 4 they build off, and then they build 4 from Falmouth class and 13 of the Grimsby class. What's interesting is they don't really get into the Halcyon class. But these ships do well. They do well. It wasn't actually Mystery to the Deep. It was another one of the shows I've done. The thing is, if you're making 8 a year, it's not going to affect the bank balance. It's not going to be that costly. But imagine if you're building 8 with, destroyer turbines, etc. So you're producing that many more turbines a year. And if you think about it, 8 a year from 1920 onwards, you'd have 160 in service by 1930. No, 80 in service by 1930, and roughly 160 in service by 1940. If you're just building 8 a year, they don't need to be fast. They just need to be fast enough. Now, if you think about that, if you consider the Flower class in World War II, they build 225 original, 69 modified. So if you start off World War II with 160-ish sloops in service already, you have, well, let's be honest, 294, 160, that's 134 left to build. You're basically halving your escort construction requirements. Yes, if you build 16 a year, you've got even more, and you definitely don't need to build any of them. You've got 320 of them in service by the beginning of World War II, and that's probably more than enough. Because also, the point I would make when we're talking about ships in service at the beginning of the war, the more of these small escorts you have to escort convoys and merchant and protect things like Scapa Flow at the beginning of World War II, the less losses you're going to take and the more losses you're going to inflict on the Germans, and those losses will have a cumulative impact. The more you destroy the early submarine crews when the Germans are far fewer submarines in 1939-1940, those are going to have a cumulative impact on the training and the preparation of ships and the later on, because a lot of those crews go on to become the nucleus of the expanded Kriegsmarines U-boat flotillas. So for every one of those crews you take out, you have a consequential larger impact. They seem a very good command development ship to find out. That's pretty much it. This is what the smaller ships are about. This is the problem for larger navies, which are attracted to all our ships must be the biggest and the best ships. Because who are you going to trust? Let's put it this way. If you're asking the Royal Navy, who are they going to trust a Type 45 to? Or HMS Queen Elizabeth? It's not going to be a junior officer, it's going to be a senior officer. Sort of go for a Type 26? Maybe. Maybe Type 26s will get commanders rather than captains in charge of them, but probably it's going to be Type 31s and 32s will get commanders, and I wouldn't be surprised if Type 26s mostly get captains, and Type 45s mostly get captains. And so for where are the appointments for lieutenant commanders? Well, that's going to be the river class, the OPVs, and that's useful for the Royal Navy. But do you really want the first time you're getting your officers to the point at which they're going to be exercising independent command, the first time they get to it to maybe be when they get to the rank of commander and they've got a many £1 £100 million something frigate to be in charge of? Or would you rather at lieutenant commander when they've got something which is £20 million, maybe less? Which would you prefer to be testing out their command skills on? It's the same with submarines. Honestly, that's my big worry when you have only an SSN force, because as much as you try and test out and train your submariners, especially when you have a smaller fleet, so you don't have as wide a pool to draw from, you have nothing to test out their command on. And realistically, you'd like to have something which was cheaper to test their command out on. And an SSK versus SSN, the SSK is a lot cheaper. It's not as capable in terms of its global strategic maneuvers, but it's a lot cheaper. With more sloops built, how should this change destroyer deployment? It seems like less need for escorts. They might focus on the offensive destroyers. Probably not. Probably destroyers have developed pretty much the same. The only difference might be with you developing the sloops more and doing more of the sloops. You might well have got some of the gun development going on, especially the dual-purpose guns, will have been accelerated because there's that much larger pool. And especially if you're also putting turbines into sloops as well as destroyers, you're going to have far more of a construction capacity for turbines than you do historically, because you're going to be building more. And if you consider your wartime construction capability is proportional to your peacetime construction capability, the more you're building as an ongoing, using and building and creating on an ongoing basis in peacetime, the dramatically much more you can grow the programs to in wartime. So the more you build, the more you can build. I would agree that, the Perisher is famous for a reason, and someday I will do a video about it when I can do some proper recording aboard a submarine. And I would agree that if you can survive a Perisher, you can probably survive anything. But I would much prefer to be able to say they survived the Perisher, and then they took out an SSK for a couple of trips before they got an SSN. Hey, Furry Kitten. It's just come up that you've been a member for 6 months. Thank you. Considering the amount of... Oh, good God, it's flashing up again. No, my members will not enjoy a makeup tutorial, and no, I am not continuing to advertise. Oh, you do more harassing of me than anything else. There's all sorts of things which might happen if you've got the sloop program going. Because if you've got a sloop program going, you've got that consistent build construction. If you've got, if you think about it, the Royal Navy doesn't really start building up destroyers till 1930s. They don't really start building new next generation destroyers. Oh, my cooch, member for 14 months. Cool. Bonjour, Chicago, I might like a makeup tutorial. Well, I'm not doing one because I don't do makeup. Nicest way, you deal with my ugly face as it is. And so let's take us on to another event which we're going to talk about, the interwar period, because this is where sloops are really quite useful. And we talk about the Tsingtao incident quite often, and for those who don't know, but I use this up quite a lot on the channel, Tsingtao incident is where a merchant ship, the SS St. Vincent de Paul, is taken by a Japanese sort of Chinese customs vessel, which is under the authority of the Japanese army, but is taken to a Japanese Navy base, and the Japanese Navy basically go, "We have nothing to do with this." Now, one of the interesting things about this scenario is, of course, that the Royal Navy don't turn up with just HMS Birmingham and Captain Brind. They are facing off against 3 Ashigara-class cruisers, which all point their guns at them, but they don't just turn up with HMS Birmingham. They also bring HMS Folkestone. Why bring Folkestone? Why not? You know, the Royal Navy has county-class cruisers there. They have 3 of them wandering around in the area, including the station flagship. They have all sorts of capabilities. They could have taken up a county class as well. It could have been a county class and a town class. Why not? Why take a sloop? Why take something which is, as much as it does point its 4-inch gun at the Japanese, something which, in terms of military value in that scenario, against 3 heavy cruisers, admittedly in that scenario no one has any value because everyone's going to get smashed at those ranges. We're talking ranges measured in feet and meters, but we're talking, okay, the low, maybe a maximum a couple of 100 meters. When you're dealing with 6-inch and 8-inch shells at this point, the odds are, the question is whether they're going to arm before they hit the target, let alone anything, but the sheer physical value of them hitting the target is probably going to go do the damage, let alone the torpedoes. But the point is, why bring a sloop? And I'm going to put in another Q&A. Or rather a poll. So, the Q&A has begun. I don't just have a poodle which occasionally sits on my face, I have a corgi. And in the nicest way, they do it, you know, I'm just happy they're sleeping away, and suddenly I have a on top of me, and I'm going, "Oh, you lied down. Yeah. Thank you." They're lovely. They do both like to curl around my head occasionally. Oh, he hits 20,000 subscribers, he has to do a makeup tutorial. That sounds like cruel and unusual punishment. I'll do a camo tutorial for 20,000 subs. Mainly because, especially if it happened by Christmas Day, my mum would finally win the bet, and the betting over the numbers of subscribers would finally be over. I'm not doing K-pop review, and I'm not doing dance instruction. That's right, it's a Miyoko class, not the Ashigaras. No, but Ashigara's in charge of them. So it's Ashigara and 3 of her sisters. Yes, they're Miyoko class, but... yeah. Considering, I think it was not last video, but another video earlier on, I said D-Day for the HMS Warspite doing her donuts. I think my brain's getting better if it's actually getting the right cruiser and the right sisters, even if it's not remembering that they're Miyoko class. Just wear the turkey hat again. Actually, I should do that, as we are getting close, but I will wear this for brew ships on Sunday, of course, as I always do for the one prior to Christmas. I will wear the turkey hat. Really, I should have worn it for the American Thanksgiving, but I don't think I did a live that day. Yes, this will be worn for brew ships. And I might even get the canines to wear their hats as well. I've done a video where we showed how Jackie Fisher danced, thanks to the lovely Glenn Stewart and Sam, my director, both her and her husband, and Glenn and his. I think they are married. I'm not sure. I should probably ask. I think they are. I presume they are, but I've never actually asked a question. So yeah, significant other. Both did dancing, and and that's in the HMS Warrior video. So I will end the poll in 4, 3, 2, 1. Just waiting for my hand to catch up with the video, to catch up with my statement. Right then. So 56% because it adds enough variable. Because it makes it 2 ships, 20%. Witnesses, 15%, because HMS Birmingham wanted a PAL, 7%. It is actually pretty much it's the variable, and you are pretty much right. You see, the thing is, if you have 2 ships, it's a squadron showing up, it's slightly more than just 1 ship, but specifically, it's not adding to the threat. HMS Birmingham is the threat, but even she's a light cruiser versus 3 heavy cruisers. So, to an extent, again, it's the Royal Navy, to an extent, trading on its name. And this is something which, again, comes up a lot. People sort of think you need to send in your biggest and best ship, but the Royal Navy isn't matching fire with fire. They aren't even sending in a heavy cruiser to match up with 3 heavy cruisers. They're sending in a light cruiser. They're basically showing their confidence. We know there won't be any trouble. We know there has been a misunderstanding. We are sure we can sort this all out with just discussion. That is the point. It's deterrence. It's conventional deterrence, but it's the trouble is often with, and I see this with a lot of people with conventional deterrence. They get so focused in on the equipment. They get so focused in on the status of the equipment, and they think you need to be greater. When actually what you're doing is you are making a statement with your presence often enough. And the fact that you've sent multiple ships, it's making a bigger statement. And let's be honest, HMS Folkestone does not add to the threat. The Japanese cannot go, oh, you've come in with 2 ships to bully us. We sent a light cruiser, you've got 3 heavy cruisers. We sent a sloop, you've got 3 heavy cruisers. And the thing is, by having the second ship, what do? They position 1 each side of the merchant vessel. So that means the merchant vessel, especially once they put their own crew aboard the merchant ship to protect it, their own naval party gets put aboard, they've supported it. You can't get at that ship without going past the Royal Navy ship. They don't need to be powerful, they need to be present. They need to have the capability there, the visibility there. And if you think about that, you can't do that with a helicopter. Because you can't have a helicopter buzzing around places. You can't do that with a speedboat. Because a speedboat buzzing around a harbour all night, etc. is going to be obvious. Parking a small ship, a sloop, the other side. You've got the light cruiser, which is your statement. Yes, it's a light cruiser, but it's also a town-class light cruiser. The Japanese are not stupid. It has 12 6-inch guns, the fastest fire. It's got torpedoes, and it's one of the most powerful units in the Royal Navy. Yes, it's a light cruiser. But the odds are, at the ranges they'd been engaging, if they decided to fight anyone in the harbour, then all of them are getting sunk. And the fact is, when the Japanese point their guns at HMS Birmingham and St. Paul and HMS Folkestone as they are leaving, Folkestone swivels her gun around, but so does Birmingham, and she literally designates a turret onto each and every single one of the bridges of the Japanese vessels. Folkestone might have something bigger hidden away, but she won't have anything big enough to really match up against an 8-inch cruiser. She's got 4-inch guns. She might have 40. She might have 40mm pom-poms and all sorts of things, but she's not got torpedoes. She hasn't got anything really big enough hidden away to make a difference in the fight. And this is the real point about a sloop and about other ships. You know, it's the big gap, I would argue, in the modern Royal Navy strength. Yes, we need more destroyers. Yes, we need more frigates. You will never get me argue we don't, because frankly we are chronically undernumbered in it. But I would argue we are even significantly more undernumbered when it comes to things like the River class. And I'm even more worried now we're replacing minesweepers with the Type 32s. Because the Type 32s are going to be capable vessels. They're going to be modified Type 31s, we know this. That are designed to support minesweeping and mine warfare operations. That's great. But there's going to be a lot less of them than there are minesweepers. And they have been traditionally minesweepers. And the minesweepers were traditionally used as backup presence ships. And ideally, you need a presence squadron like the Fisheries Squadron, which looks after the UK, to be based at Gibraltar, to be based at Singapore permanently, which we do have some, to be based in Bahrain for the Middle East. You need vessels there which are a constant presence in those high threat regions. You need some based in the Falklands. And it can't be one ship, you need a couple of them. You need 3 of them, at least, if not 4. Enjoy the dog walk, Richards. The Brits didn't design the sloops with the ability to take torpedoes. The reason the Royal Navy doesn't do that is because they're designed for everything else. They can be easily adapted to be minesweepers, mine layers. They can be net ships. They can be anti-submarine warfare escorts. They can provide AA defense for convoys. They are all the things which the corvettes later do and various other ships. They can do oceanography. They are very useful vessels. They are all rounders. The things they aren't designed is they aren't torpedoes and they aren't designed to be as fast as other destroyers. But the thing is, they are about continual presence. And the other reason I think you have Folkestone taken with them, with Birmingham, is because, let's be honest, the sloop crews and officers know the ports. The cruisers, they do the big visits and they do the wider presence missions and they sometimes act as a group wandering around. Who is continue visiting? Even places like Tsingtao. It's going to be the sloops. So the sloop turning up is just a normal part of the process. Oh, when I get the 1901, depends if I order it from Amazon or if I manage to find it in my local co-op. I have a local co-op which is fairly decent for having the 1901 sometimes. If anyone knows of it, in Ashton there is a wonderful co-op and they actually do stock 1901. And the reason they do is because the manager is as much of a iron brewer aficionado as I am. But he doesn't always have it in. But that's life. That's life. Also, random question. Would people like me to keep the Jack Speak videos going after the Christmas season? Because I can do them fairly easy and I have a whole dictionary to work from. So there's all sorts of ones I could get into. Where is my dictionary of Jack Speak? I've got it around me somewhere. Is it behind me? Where is it? Yeah, it's somewhere around here. It's not far away. I know, because I was reading it earlier. Where has it gone? Nope, that's not it. That's not it. Where's the Jack Speak dictionary gone? Oh, there it is, right in front of me. There you go. Ba-da-da. There's all sorts of interesting things in here. Flannel. Elaborate storytelling or a plethora of weak excuses. The man's got more flannel than a pusser's blanket. CBS. Also, the white shirt-like garment that Jack wears under his outer jumper. It has a square blue border neck. In pre-war days, it really was made of a cream-coloured flannel material. There's also a great joke in here. Are you a volunteer for submarines? No, Chief. Not me, Chief. Never. Good. You have been detailed to them. I'll try to keep them in 1 minute. My coach was iron brew availability factor in house hunting. Yeah. As does reliable down in Falmouth. Clarke, would a set of 4 mine-line cable sloops based out of Gibraltar be a back-of-the-mind threat presence to all countries that run freight through the ditch along the Med and out into the Atlantic? Would certainly have them, give them an interesting issue. I always try to keep them to 1 minute. Actually, I try to keep them to 58 seconds. But still, occasionally, YouTube cuts them off. I mean, is there such a thing as third iron brew? There is, but it's evil stuff. So, we talked a lot about the River class, so it seemed appropriate to have them in here, pictured again next to HMS Belfast. And the interesting thing is, that's pretty much your sloop compared to your town class cruiser. That's as good an image as you're gonna get as the reality of the size difference and the presence. They are, I would argue, not the largest vessels in the world, and that's purpose of them. They're not supposed to be first rates. They're not supposed to be the first rank of vessel. They are supposed to be something which can fill in some gaps and be a presence mission. At risk of sounding silly, I thought British submarines were all volunteer, or is that Americans? In theory, they're volunteers. Now, could you replace the 30mm seaway system? Why would you want to do that? That's an honest question. Why would you want to do that? I can understand why you want to add a close-in weapon system onto a phalanx, but why would you want to replace the 30mm at the front with it? And why is your first response upgunning it? Because there are reasons to upgun them. There are certain spaces where I would love to upgun them in sort of parts of the world. I would love them to be have slightly more firepower for their own security. But why is that your first response? To make them more expensive and to make them more complicated and require more crew. Think about it. Because I can guarantee, Steve, you were not the only person here watching this video whose first response was upgun them. I'm not going to put a poll or something like that in the chat, but I'm going to see what people think. Thank you, Verdun. Thank you. Well, frigate, no. Anti-drone work, all sorts of things going on. Well, let's start off with. I would say, looking at those masts, the first question I'd ask is, might they have electronic warfare capabilities? Because the first thing you always notice when you go back to, let's say, Folkestone, she has a lot of systems to help her listen to radio signals and pick up radio signals. And one of the things about having lots of ships wandering around is ships can pick up communications while they're wandering around. They are sovereign territory wandering around, all sorts of capabilities on them. Now, I would therefore suggest that if I was going to upgrade them, the first thing I'd be looking at is electronic warfare capabilities. I would then probably look more likely at 40mm cannon, considering they already have Scanter 2D radar and the Kelvin Hughes sharp eye navigation radar. They already do have a BAE commander control system, so the things can be integrated. I'd say I would actually, considering they're carrying a Bushmaster 30mm cannon forward, I'd say I'd be more likely to upgrade that for 40mm gun. Because you can do a lot more with 40mm than just anti-missile work. And the thing is, if you orientate your defences for an OPV around missiles, what happens if the person attacks you with small boats? What happens if they attack you with other things? The thing is, you're going to probably face a lot of low-level threats. And if they do shoot a missile at you, you haven't got enough of a magazine depth to actually survive a proper magazine salvo of missiles. So they shoot an individual missile at you. If your ECM gear works, great. If your 40mm gear works, great. You get hit by it, you're not coming back. But either way, the thing is, your actual response is going to be the moment they start firing missiles at you to get out the area. Because again, it doesn't matter whether you're this or this. You're not supposed to be in that kind of zone. And if you add on something like phalanx, etc., the thing is, people get the idea, well, she's got anti-missile capability, so she can survive missile attacks. So therefore you can take them in a high-threat environment. But the reason they had destroyers on the China station as well as sloops was because if you have a higher threat scenario, you send in a destroyer. If you have the higher threat scenario, you send in the Type 31, not the OPV. The thing is, the OPV is for doing the presence mission, for doing the engagement, for being an extra escort for convoys. And maybe in wartime you upgrade them to have that phalanx, to have that things, or you might just put anti-submarine warfare capabilities on them, the ability to transport the ASW drones and control them. Maybe some ability to, sort of support those sort of operations to provide extra support to a task group. Actually once you start upgrading the weaponry too far, you make yourself a problem. Because A, you add on to expense, you add on to the crew numbers, you add on a weapon system which is going to require a lot more maintenance than their current 30mm system does. And you make the vessel more expensive and more complicated to keep going. The Sandowns would be sloops. Sloops were often minesweepers. Halcyon class were technically minesweeping sloops. But the thing is, the moment you go down the route of deciding that all your ships have to be as armed as they can be for their roles, you're going to make them even more expensive, and for a medium power, you're going to make it even more difficult to afford enough hulls, because the price tag of those ships is going to be different. But also, you're going to have someone in the Treasury turn around and go, well, they've got the anti-missile capability, because they've got phalanx, they've got this stuff, so they can do the same role as a Type 31, when they can't. That's not what you have them for. You have them because you can probably buy 6 for the price of one Type 31. And the thing is, in that scenario, you can use those 6 for things. For missions which it's actually overkill to use the Type 31 for. But there are still going to be missions where, frankly, you can't use one of these, but you use a Type 31 for. And there are going to be missions where you want to use a Type 26 rather than a Type 31, because, again, you need that level of firepower. And there are going to be missions where you want to use a Type 45 or Type 83 rather than a Type 26. If we consider what's currently going on in the Red Sea, there is a reason HMS Diamond has been deployed rather than one of the Type 23s. If we consider the Royal Navy has very good Type 20, it has had very good Type 23 frigates. Many of them have had a midlife upgrade. They've had all sorts of refits. They've been upgraded. Some of them have CAM. They have various other systems added on. In fact, if you look at recently, the most recent addition has been the Type 23. Was, I think, the first to get the Naval strike missile from Norway. Now, that's good. That's lovely. But it's not a Type 23 which has been sent, it's a Type 45. A destroyer. An area air defense ship. And the thing is, you have gradated levels of threat. The standard presence vessel in the Gulf for the British was usually a Type 23 which has lost its towed array sonar. And is basically just being used as a general purpose frigate, along with a load of minesweepers to act as force multipliers. Because that's what you need for that level of threat. You either need a ship which has the systems to be able to deal with the higher level threat that you're theoretically going to be dealing with in that area, or you don't. Because most of the time, you're dealing with missions which, if you have that level of capability, you're either going to force them to upgrade their capability to match you, in which case you're raising the stakes, or you're spending a lot of money which you don't need to spend. And the thing about the presence mission, the engagement mission, is the smaller, cheaper vessels, to an extent, we don't like to mention this, but they're designed to be expendable. You would prefer not to lose them. You never want to lose a ship. But if you do, it's better you lose something like this, you risk something like this, than you lose something like that. And that is the reality of what we're looking at. The reality of what we're seeing. A naval force, when you're doing the presence mission, has to think many layers ahead. That also goes into the ship's armament. Yes, as said, my view is that, frankly, they should probably be fitted with a 40mm, the same 40mm which is going on Type 31s. 2 reasons: 1, commonality, and 2, it gives them a slight increase in firepower. And the both as 40mm are very good. But pretty much they are tripwire vessels. ECM, I have no qualms with. Drone capability would seem an essential mix to have to have drones aboard so they can maximize their presence. The ability to fast launch and recover boats, great. Maritime security, fisheries protection, all those things, that's good mission. That's good capabilities. A 40mm would be fine. If you want to add on a second weapon, then yes, a phalanx would make sensible, and then you'd have a 40mm forward and a phalanx aft. Thank you, David Goulding. It would make sense to have that. But also, I'd be quite happy if you stuck a second 40mm aft. Because again, that would kind of fit with what these ones used to have, because, again, if we consider the Hastings class. Like HMS Folkestone here, they're armed with two 4-inch guns and a quadruple 0.5-inch AA gun, i.e. machine, and the quadruple machine gun mount. They were capable of 16 knots. I'm glad to say the River class are slightly faster. They are capable of officially 25 knots in terms of the batch 2s, which is nice. And they have an endurance of 35 days, so they can spend a month at sea. But it makes them useful, especially useful for maritime security and those sort of missions. And they can also carry up to 50 troops can be embarked, which is really nice. Batch 1s could take 18. The Batch 2s have another accommodation space aft, which can accommodate 50 Royal Marines, which can also get their raiding boats aboard as well. So yeah, that's a useful utility. And if you're talking about a modern uncrewed Flower class, I would say you probably build them based on the River class hull. Honestly, that's going to be the cheapest thing to upgrade and modify to it. If you asked me to turn around tomorrow and build for Britain the ability to have uncrewed ships that would back up every single warship as a sort of loyal kayak, it would be this. And my scenario would probably include keeping a helicopter landing pad so that I could quickly load personnel onto it. Having basic accommodation facilities for maintenance crew to operate her when they need to be aboard. But otherwise, I'd use the systems which the Americans have already developed for uncrewed vessels, and which Britain was also involved in development of, and probably arm them with a couple of 57mm and some VLS. And that would be it. They're adequate, but not ideal. Yeah, 9681. That's it. I think, in many regards, their armament and the armament of Royal Navy patrol vessels is a legacy of the 1990s and the peace dividend. I think having slightly more firepower, not much more firepower is required. Remember, I'm just saying 40mm on 30mm. And that sounds like I am splitting hairs, really, when I'm talking about it. Even I admit it sounds like I'm being fussy. But the reason is because of the range of ammunition viabilities for 40mm. The sheer capabilities it can bring versus the 30mm. The 40mm shells are far more robust, far more capable, and far more likely to provide upgrade path, because if we consider what happened with 40mm ammunition recently, basically the scenario is, when we're looking at 40mm, is that it's just big enough that you can get most of the advances you want to put into small shells without too much cost and too much difficulty. Whereas whenever they try and put them in smaller set of shells, it runs up into a very much of cost versus value. And that's the problem. It's the size. It's the size and the space you're dealing with within the shell. A 40mm cannon shell has just that much more space than a 30mm to make life just that tad easier. Like most, would an uncrewed flyer class carry drones for longer range spotting or anti-some weapon drops? Potentially. Potentially, but again you have the similar issues as you do with automation of guns. In that, at the moment, you would need some human intervention in the loading and arming and setting and prepping of those. You would need to design a lot of systems. So scaled down Type 21 retaining boilers, both probably a scaled down Type 31 really. Now again, the 57mm sounds like a better option, but when you look at the BAE Mark 110 etc. the 57mm, they are lovely, but I would say the trouble is with the 57mm is it's a cost level above the 40mm. It is a qualitative and capability increase, as Ed Sutherland's just pointed out. It is, but it's also a far bigger cost jump from a 30mm to. It's a far bigger jump from from even a 40mm to 57mm than it is from a 30mm to a 40mm. And again, it's that cost point, because the moment you arm up, if you consider what Ed Sutherland was talking about, they have 76mm. Thailand use a model of a River class. They do. But the thing is, for the Royal Navy, if you arm up the River class too much, it then becomes a case of, well, is this a, does it in image match to maybe the Treasury and some politicians' perspective, the Type 31? It'll be a lot cheaper than them, a lot less capable, but it'll look the same. So the Royal Navy has to be very careful with sloops and OPVs. They have to be incredible. They always have had to be. In the interwar period, they had to be careful because they had to make sure they didn't look like destroyers. And again, if we look at their design and we look at their shaping, that doesn't really look like a destroyer hull all the time, does it? And it's the same here. They've got to be careful, because the thing is, they've got the ships above it. And this is where the trouble is. The urge is to arm up a ship so it can deal with the situation. But not every ship has to be the most capable warship it can be. Because the thing is, you go, right then, this situation is not right for River class, send in a Type 31. This ship is not right for a Type 31. This situation, send in a Type 26. This situation is not right for Type 26, send in a Type 83 or Type 45. That's the reality of the situation. You have to think like that. You can't think, we always send in this ship, and if it can't do it, oh, we need to upgrade its armament. No. Is it the situation it's built for? Yes, send it. If not, send something else. So, upgrading its armament sounds great, and you end up with a more capable ship, but does it undermine the rest of the force structure? And let's be honest, even if you add in the 76mm or 57mm and all those things, is it going to be the equivalent to a Type 31? No. So you have to think, what is its value? What is its role? Before you start arguing some, I had this discussion. There is quite a popular person on Twitter who basically calls themselves Sir Humphrey on Twitter, and they are lovely. They chat a lot about various things. And they talk a lot about the Royal Navy, and they run the Pinstripe Line blog. And I will get into debates occasionally with them over OPV armaments. They're very much this armament is okay. But mainly they spend up arguing against the people who want to put lots and lots of weapons on the OPVs. And the thing is, you don't want to do that. Yes, you can, but that's going to come at a cost of something. Let's put it this way. If we look at the River class, and we look at the adaptations for, well, the ones which the adaptations from the Brazilian Navy, the Amazonas class, they're lovely vessels. Or the Thai Navy, the Krabi class. They are lovely, but they are a very different cost metric. I would argue, actually, no, the Brazilian ones, the Amazonas, are pretty much almost copies of the British ones. And again, they're armed with a 30mm cannon, they're armed with a couple of 25mm guns, and all those things. But the Krabbies, they're different. They have a 76mm gun, and a couple of 30mm. But they only have a 20-meter, you know, they have a 20-meter flight deck, they have all those things. But the thing is, they are a cost differential. And if we look at the difference of the Thai Navy versus the Royal Navy, in terms of their current ships and current force structure, there a very different force emerges than what the Royal Navy maintains. So that affects the needing for more firepower because, well, frankly, they need those ships available. They need those ships. Just trying to find my list of the Royal, my up-to-date list of the Royal Thai Navy. No, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. That's their Riverine Regiment. Go from my... So, currently they have one submarine under construction in China with two more planned. They have the Chakri Narabet class helicopter carrier of Spain. Originally came from Spain, and originally is based on the Principe de Ostras. They have some amphibious warfare ships. Again, not many, but they have some. When it comes to frigates, they are mostly looking at, well, they've got some which are less than 2,000 tons, designated a frigate, but probably wouldn't be called a frigate by anyone else, other than China and them. They've got the Narasan class, which are nearly 3,000 tons. And then they've got the vessels built in South Korea, which are 3,700 tons. Then, in terms of corvettes, patrol vessels, well, they don't have, again, as many. So the thing is, you're dealing with a very different structure of force, which has very different needs than the British. What gun is too big for an OPV? It depends who you are. If you're Thailand, it's only 6mm makes sense with the scenario they have. And if you consider, again, a lot of their ships have the 76mm. It's a very common gun for them to fit around their navy. All their... Basically... it's almost all their... well, yeah. Two of their frigates... one of their amphibious warfare ships has it. Pretty much anything which is Western built or Western designed and that means built in Thailand as well, have the 76mm fitted. It's one of the most common weapon systems they fitted, and they even fitted it to some of their Chinese-built vessels. They love the Ottomalera 76mm, and it fits their navy and fits their requirements. So for them, that makes sense. But if if you're what you should be looking at when you're doing your OPV is you should be looking at your own guns and going, what is constant fit and what fits your requirements and what fits your needs. In terms of crew requirements, the 30mm and 40mm is pretty much the same. Both as 30mm or remote control 30mm Bushmaster system, it's roughly the same. Okay, crew wise. Cost, there's a slight difference, but again, firepower, 40mm is enough of an upgrade. Yeah, the submarine deal is on hold over engine issues, but they'll probably, if they end up not going with the Chinese, they'll go with the probably with the Germans or the Swedes. But yeah, again, the whole thing is really, as shown with sloops, as shown with the Acacia class, as shown all these things, is you need off-the-shelf equipment. Don't start. The problem that comes whenever we're talking about ships and their weaponry is people will suddenly go, "Ooh, we want this high-tech piece of equipment, this high-tech piece of equipment." That's great. But that's not what you need for your OPV. Think off the shelf. Think cheap. Think standard. Think something which is going to be easy to maintain down an austere pipeline. And something you don't mind maintaining in foreign ports. Think something you're probably not going to have to upgrade a lot, because let's be honest, the 40mm cannon is a 40mm cannon. Missile systems, you're going to want to upgrade and keep them going and all those sort of things, but a 40mm cannon, a 30mm cannon, you're probably not going to. You're not going to need to worry about it. Now, why is the NATO dead set on 20mm for most of their OPVs? Why do they have 20mm on so many OPVs? Because again, it's cheap. And also look at where those OPVs are working. What are the likely threats? What are they likely dealing with? And look at the size of those OPVs. Take care, John Shea. So you have to think through all these things before you start talking about these systems. You have to think what their mission is again. If they're going to be doing primarily is public engagement, you want something which can ideally be easily locked down without looking too obvious, and where even if people do try and fiddle about with it, it's very easy to spot and fix. You want something which you can have the people wandering on going, oh, you can wander around, you can have a look around here, that's fine, and not worry about it. Now, again, if you go with another Rasmussen class, they do have multiple stand flex options. And the Naval Rasmussen are an excellent class, and really, to be honest, to my mind, are the ultimate expression of a modern sloop, because of the adaptability of stand flex. But the fact is, they are limited compared to the capabilities of a frigate in terms of the stand flex they can take, in terms of the capability of other ships. But they are good. But again, if you're going to go with that, then you have to invest in and set yourself up with stand flex. If you decide, if you're going with stand flex, you have to invest and upgrade and use it. And if you're not making a big jump into it, that's a big cost to go to for a class of OPVs. If you're going to use stand flex for your entire navy, which does make sense, I would argue, for some medium powers,
that's great. And make that investment and go into it whole hog. Not just your OPVs, but your frigates. Everything has to have the stand flex system on it. But if you're not doing that, then there's no point in doing that. There's no point in doing stand flex just for the OPVs. It's too expensive. Versus buying a couple of standalone units. It's again, the problem is the perfect versus the practical. The ideal versus the good enough. And the thing about OPVs, the thing about these vessels is they are the good enough. The best examples of them in terms of their utility, viability and practicability are ones where the motto was, that'll do. And again, why are you upgunning them? What is your reason for upgunning them? What are they going to be doing? Why are you upgunning and sending a river class into a high threat environment it's not designed for, instead of sending a Type 31 or Type 26? They wouldn't have sent Folkestone in alone. That's not what she's designed for. That's not her purpose. They send her in with HMS Birmingham. And so, Denmark made total sense because they had the 14 Flixtons that started the ball rolling. It's like buying a starter kit. It locks you in, pretty much. And it's a good system for them. It is a very good system. Honestly, the Danish Navy, the way it's run for them, has worked out for them financially excellently. So your answer to that, Stafford, and this is the honest answer you have to think about. Type 31 is coming into service. You know it's not ready yet, but it's being they're being built. They're coming in to service, same as the Type 26s are. Currently, the vessels you're talking about be the Type 23 general purposes. They're the equivalent of the Type 31s. So they're what will be replaced by the Type 31s. And yes, they should be building more Type 26, etc. But if your argument is to therefore you need to upgrade your river class to fill in for the Type 31s and fill in for the frigates, that's a role they've never been built for nor envisaged for. And you're saying you're going to be using them for a higher threat environment than they've been sustained for. I'd argue if you're doing that, you've got problems. And what you should really be concentrating your funds on is building more Type 31s and Type 26s. You're going to have to eat the threat for a while, but that's probably going to be eaten by maintaining the Type 23s in service. It's not... Let's put it this way. Which would you rather send to a high threat environment? A Type 23 frigate or a river class patrol boat that you've just added a bit of a better gun on? Which is a better fit? The argument's going to be that the result is the Type 23. So the moment you start going under a scenario, you've already caused yourself a problem. You're sending a ship in which is not built for that mission to try and accomplish that mission, and when it doesn't work, because it is going to get swamped, it is going to get overloaded because it's not designed for that. You're going to have dealt with. You're going to lost that ship, and you're going to lost the ability to deter that conflict because you responded with the wrong level of asset. These are not corvettes, they're OPVs. They are sloop equivalents. They're not frigates in terms of the modern parlance. So the thing is, you need to always think through what you're doing and what you're saying, because especially when you're getting into defense and conflict management and deterrence. Because whilst, yes, it's a very quick and obvious thing, upgun the rivers to make them more capable. Why are we doing that? Well, because the Type 31s aren't service, but the Type 23 GPs are. So instead of getting rid of the Type 23 general purposes, we should be maintaining them in service for longer until the Type 31s become available. But that will cost money. Well, so will upgrading the Type 31 the River class fleet. And if you are upgrading the River class fleet, you're going to have to take them out of service to upgrade them. So you're not going to have them in service or the Type 31s in service while they're upgrading. And by the time you finish upgrading them, they'll probably come into service. The Type 23s are in service though, so if you need them for that mission, then you stop selling them off and scrapping them. Currently, they're also being upgraded, a fairly large number of them. So you currently have 10 active in the Royal Navy, 3 active with the Chilean Navy, 1 laid up and 2 retired. That's HMS Westminster, which had its life extension refit suspended as of 2023. That's the laid up one. Monmouth and Montrose are awaiting disposal. But Montrose only left service in April 2023. She was only decommissioned in April 2023. So if you were actually looking at ships and going, okay, what do we do here? If you desperately need ships, Westminster and Montrose would be the 2 you go to. And I would agree with Paul, it would be better to put new ships into ordinary and put them into reserve status rather when new ship come out, rather to be sure capacity, and so you maintain some reserve there, than to necessarily get rid of them. Like a larger River class OPV with, they can land a helicopter, Merlin helicopter. They do have that, and they do have that. So that's still a low-level presence, because that you've Knights of Griffin, you pretty much just listed off what is a Batch 2 River class. And again, you have to always think in the presence mission, if you're taking the OPVs out of service to gun them, you're actually going to make your problems worse. Short and medium term, because it's going to take months to upgrade them all. Because again, if you're putting in guns bigger than a 40mm, if you're putting in missiles and those systems, or a phalanx system, you're going to need to put in communications cables. You're going to need to make sure they have the radars and all systems are set up to sustain them in the points you put them in, and can give all the relevant data in the right way, and the command interface system works, and you're going to have to make sure they all work together. That's all going to be far more complicated than just sticking a 40mm Bofors, which pretty much receives the same data as the 30mm Bushmaster. And a basic hangar, well, you could get a telescopic hangar, could be fitted to any of them, really. That's really not that much bigger. So, Clarke, it's going to be upgrading Westminster and building a new hull. The thing is, upgrading Westminster will be quicker than getting a new hull into service. But it is cheaper to build a new hull, which is why they've made the decision they've currently made. Because they found the hull was in such a bad condition. No. There have already been 3 sold to Chile, but those were sold ages ago. In the nicest way, Montrose and Monmouth haven't been sold. They're technically waiting disposal. So none of them have been sold off yet. There is often rumours going around, this nation's going to buy them, that nation's going to buy them. But the honest answer is that most people do realise the Royal Navy's, the ones that are leaving service, are the ones who've been worked to frigating death. The Type 23s were a light frigate design, which was supposed to last a certain time in service. But they were built as the successors to the Type 12s, and they were going to provide the numbers for the Royal Navy. Originally they were going to build 24, they ended up building 16. 3 have been sold off. or 3 were sold off to the Chilean Navy, which took them down to 13. That was a big problem, because they've been the workhorses of the Royal Navy. And the ones which, let's be honest, the whole problem with Westminster was that was supposed to be one of the better hulls, and when they actually started looking at it, oh frigate, that thing has suffered. Putting in the nicest way, there is a legacy of the Cold War. The idea, and this was already touched on by someone earlier in the chat, the idea war would be over quickly, so there was no point having reserves because you never activate the reserves in time enough to fight the war. So there was no point having a naval reserve for warships. When realistically, having ships in reserve was probably the most sensible thing that you should have done. I would argue the Type 45s, they should have built 9 and kept 3 in reserve. And just kept rotating out the vessels, which, whenever they're sending in a ship for large refit, activate one of the reserve ships, and then the ship in major refit goes into the reserve group. And that would have been the sensible thing. Because at least then you'd have 9 ships, and you'd be able to call on some more. But the trouble is, as I said, a legacy of the Cold War was that any war would be over so quickly that you wouldn't be able to... There was no point having reserve ships, because you wouldn't be able to activate them. Night, Michael. And Edson, ultimately facing the reality of overstretch over the last few decades, when what we do have is so badly overused, falling apart. Pretty much. And the thing is, again, let's say you upgrade the River class. You've given more weapons. The thing is, who's going to backfill their missions? Think about that. You take the River class off their missions, what's going to be covering their duties? What's going to be covering their roles? And the batch 2s can take 50 Royal Marines, the batch 1s of the River class can take 18 plus. Blackwell Maximus. It's 50 on the batch 2s. They did at one point try and claim 60, but then they actually tried to stick them in there. They went down to 50 very quickly. There's... Royal Marines do actually need a certain amount of space, otherwise they do start to smell. They need some sort of cleaning facilities. Again, I would say the drone defensive carriers you're talking about in terms of looking at a Type 31. And if you look at it, she's got 57mm, she's got 40mm, she's got missiles. That's literally it. It's a flak frigate. Honestly, the Royal Navy keeping some of the reserve, I would say, especially the ones which have actually been rebuilt, you probably do want to try and keep in service as long as possible. I would argue the ones which have been rebuilt. But if you consider HMS Westminster was used for Tomorrow Never Dies. Suffolk was used for Making Waves, which was an interesting series. And... well, Montrose and Monmouth were both used for Command Approved, which is, you know, a sort of video you can see in the Action Stations exhibition at Portsmouth Dockyard, Historic Dockyard. So I'm not sure how comfortable that. I thought it was mainly for a Falkland and South Georgia channel. That is part of their duties, yes, capabilities for the one down there. But they do other duties with them as well. It's also for things like oil rigs and those sort of things. Royal Marines do require something more than crayons. Montrose is a good ship. In fact, Montrose was the ship when I was 5 years old. My dad was building her, and I got to crawl around her and went into spaces which probably 5-year-olds shouldn't have gone. Literally crawled in along her hull plating at some points.
on the inside. And this 3-day war was proven by Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. I know, it's a constant thing of me, the thing that I find funny, the idea that conflicts are going to be quick. But the whole idea was, any conflict in the Cold War would go nuclear very shortly, and then the world would blow up, so there's no point worrying about it. Basically, people got so locked into, and this is the thing we see with the modern procurement again, they get so locked into the idea of the ultimate weapon, of the nuclear weapon, of this sort of thing. You have problems. They get so locked into it, they can't get themselves out of the idea of anything less will be used. And the odds are, I've always believed that you would end up with a sort of nuclear stalemate, in that if either side uses nuclear weapons, they know they're going to lose. So neither side uses them, but both sides maintains them staring at each other. And the trouble is, that means that in terms of conflict, you have to be really careful how you manage it. Because if you push either side too far, to the point at which they've got nothing less to lose, then the nuclear weapons could fly. And that's a real problem in conflict management. Because it means, can you really win that kind of war? Can you win a war between superpowers? Because if you push it too far, nukes fly and both sides lose. Now, can the Rivers class be supplied by Chinook? Well, with the big ones, I think the big ones can actually. Chinook can get down on them. Let me just remember that they have. The batch ones have a 25-ton crane, but the batch twos have a 16-ton crane. Batch twos have a Merlin capable flight deck and UAVs coming over. I don't think they can receive. Hang on, I'm not sure. There could be. I think the. Ooh, Clyde. Clyde used to be funny, didn't she? I'm fairly certain they tested out. Clyde's listed as Merlin capable, as being Merlin capable as well. She's the one which has been sold to the Bahrain now as Al Zubara. But I believe I seem to remember there being something about a Chinook testing her deck. I'm not sure if they ever confirmed it though. No, the Long War is the problem with the current VLS, because you don't have to resupply the VLS. Yeah, but you said the Short War is the problem with the current VLS. Yeah, the idea was you wouldn't have to resupply. The moment you have to resupply VLSs, there's an issue. Especially if you try and resupply them at sea. Cute, nice to go from. Oh, my mum was with. I can't remember what my mum and sister were doing in time. I think my sister was also. My mum and sister were also with us, and I think they were wandering. They were with one section being shown round, and then my dad and I wandered off. And my dad was being typical naval architect, going, see this, and you really want to look in here and see this drawing and this welding and the way we designed this, and typical 5-year-old went, oh, I could get in that space, and went crawling in, and I was just sitting there smiling, and I think the person who was with him, who might have been Royal Navy, I think he was a Royal Navy officer, was just looking at it going, I can see the health and safety forms flying at me. The blizzard coming my way. I guessed that Knights are going around. H was done. I guessed that after I read it. To make a River class into a Corvette, well, if you look at the options for the Type 31 project, you will see a River class Corvette. I would say it's a toss-up between Navy Lookout or Think Defense as to which has the better page about it. But I would argue probably I go with the UK Defence Journal, looking at the Avenger, which was basically an expanded river class. And if you look at it, it's an interesting design, and you can quite clearly see it is an expanded river class. If I put down the video, a link in the description below. The trouble is, realistically, it was not enough of a differential between it and a river class. That's why they went with the design they did. The Arrowhead is a lot more than an upscale river, I do agree. But the Avenger is what I was talking about, not the Arrowhead. They also had a version based on the Amazonas class, and yeah, they have a few. The BAE put in a couple of design options. They put the Cutlass class and they put the Avenger class in. Cutlass class design is really cool. I'll add that into description as well. Still based on the river class to an extent. There you go. Oh, if you went for the largest hull, you could probably add in another 24 to 32 VLS hulls, VLS tubes. But if you think about it, that would be, you could probably maybe even add in more. It depends on what bit you add into the middle, the extension bit. But again, you're asking yourself the question is, why are you doing that? Is it better to do that, or is it better to try and build more hulls? And this is the very basic question you always have to ask yourself. Is it better to build more hulls and make the case for more hulls, or up-arm the hulls you're building? And that is always the problem, because if you have your budget of X, you can divide that by maybe a dozen vessels of Y level, or half a dozen of Z level. And Z is going to be a lot more powerful than Y, but think about it in terms of your operational capability, because if you have 12 ships or 6 ships, the rule of 3, you'll have 4 available if you have 12. You'll have 2 available if you have 6. Because one will be for every one that's available, you'll have 1 in refit or training, refit or training, and you'll have 1 in transit or training, or basically 2 in either in refit, transit, training, all the various things a ship needs to go through, dry docking, all those maintenance, those things that they need to do.
For every one ship you have in service, you'll have 2 going through that. So, is it better to have Z level, which are the more powerful ships, or Y level and be able to be in more levels and just be able to send to, if necessary, dispatch 2 of Y level? So this is again your problem once you start talking about sloops, once you start talking about ships for a presence mission. You have to think again, presence is about presence. It's not just how big a thing turns up, it's how often you turn up. Well, to be honest, if there could be, yeah. Basically, if Canada built 24, they could have 12 on each coast, and they would usually have. And the thing is, there's also a scalability. So, once you get above a certain number, you actually start to generate more than your rule of 3. Okay? If you get to 12, you can usually guarantee the availability of 5 rather than 4. Usually, more often than not, you'll have 5 or 6 available. You can guarantee the availability of 4. More often than not, you'll have 5 or 6 available if you have 12. If you have 24, that can go up again. So you might usually be able to have 14 could be on call from 24. The thing is, some of them are going to be various levels. Some of them are actually going to be able to be are actually going to be deployed, but some of them are going to be at the point of training or deployability that they're going to be able to be on call. So again, you have a scalability in the numbers terms. You get far more efficiency. You also get far better force generation, because if you think about it, if you've got 24 ships and one goes into refit and has major issues in the refit, let's say there's a fire. Well, that disruption is far easier to absorb over a group of 24 ships and still maintain force levels than if you have a group of 6 ships. Because that's one refit which is extended, which you can manage through the wider fleet without really affecting the wider force as much as if it's one of the 6. If it's one of the 6, then you're probably going to have to delay other vessels going into refit, which is going to ripple on, and that can have an impact in your availability for years, maybe decades. So the smaller the force you have, the bigger an impact an accident or an issue can have on you. And also the more difficult it is to sustain presence and your scalability of your capabilities. So again, it comes down to numbers. And the thing is about ships like this, sloops, OPVs, they're about that overall force generation, that force structure. It's very easy to generate their deployability and their presence because they have very little in them that can go wrong comparatively to the other larger ships. And so on the same time, it comes in with submarines. Yes. The SSN is a far more capable tool. I would argue that Britain, it would be best served by doing one of 2 options. You could either build some SSKs to act as force multipliers for the SSNs, or build some SSGNs. In the Dreadnought class SSBNs, build 2 more vessels, 2 more, and buy inserts for their tubes, which allow them to take cruise missiles or hypersonics if you wanted fitted them in. And then you have those ships as part of your conventional deterrence force. And that acts as force multiplication assets for your carriers, for everything. And that costs 2 more submarines of the Dreadnought class,
We're already building 4. And the thing is, then you have 6 boats. And then if you have a problem with one of the, and let's say one of the ballistic missile boats, it needs longer in refit, you can bring in one of the SSGNs, take out the inserts, put in the ballistic missiles, and tell it to go off on its duties. Now, it's probably going to be more complicated than just saying that, but it's not going to be as complicated as it would be to try and magically make a ballistic missile submarine appear from nowhere. If you could add in some SSKs as well, I'd be a really happy man. But, you know, in nicest way, in that world, I'd hope to be getting free LHDs and all sorts of things. That's the sort of world where someone has sat me down and gone, Alex, you are now Secretary of State for Defence. Here is a blank check. Go and build the armed forces Britain needs. And I'll go, hallelujah. Army, you're getting some artillery and some decent APCs. Quickly. Air Force. Right then, you're getting all the F-35As I can get my hands on. Royal Navy, you're getting all the F-35Bs we have and any more I can get my hands on. And now we're sorting out the rest. Oh, and by the way, we're doubling our AWACS order. But leave that all to one side. And electronic warfare order and our tanker order. But, you know, that's just me. It also gets better value for money from deterrence order. Yes, it does. It basically, in the nicest way, doing that really helps with other things. Also, then, if you really want to have fun with people and want to tell people, we have reduced the number of ballistic missile submarines we have to make for the world safer. You can just always have the badge, the ship in long-term refit badge as an SSGN, as part of the SSGN squadron. So you realistically are actually operating with a fleet of 4 SSBNs. But what happens is the ship which is long-term refit maintenance is an SSGN, and then if you just rotate the boats out of the squadron into the ballistic missile squadron when you need to get that going. So you basically are operating with an effective strength of 4, but you officially have a strength of 3. I would keep the first gen Typhoons are still in service. I just wouldn't deactivate them until I had enough A's in service. I would have to actually, it's going to sound strange, but actually I would have to be careful about how quickly I got the shipyards to turn on the spigots, because I'd have to up crew training and crew recruitment first. So before I could upgrade, could really start building the new ships and getting them in service, I need to have the crew numbers coming up. But that's just me. Anyway, I'm going to say it's 10 to 11. I'm not 100% well still, so I'm going to call that a night. I need to schedule bilge pumps. So I need to send an email out to people to try and schedule bilge pumps for tomorrow. Clarke, to find out only ones are in reserve for. They've got some of them out of reserve to activate to make up numbers in dealing with the larger threat and the deployments going on. They're talking about putting them back into reserve or getting rid of them completely. But there are some in service. What a bilge pump topic be? There are so many things for us to cover. If I can get a bilge pumps episode recorded, the thing is I need to get it recorded Friday, ideally. Friday is when I need to get it recorded, so I need to get out a thing. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Have fun. Thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Black Masters. Thank you, David Golding. Thank you, H.S. Verdun. Thank you, Ed Sutherland. What else we got coming up? I haven't got that list here. I still got the year of technology up. I haven't put up the year of the aircraft carrier. Thank you very much, DG40. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thank you, Renan. Thank you, Lions. Thank you, Colin Cameron. Thank you, Paul Amos. Thank you, everyone who's supporting the channel. Thank you, everyone who's a subscriber. Thank you, everyone who's a member of the channel. Thank you, everyone who's a patron, who does the Ko-fi things. Thank you very much, because, yeah, in no real update, still not being paid by the university, which owes me 5 weeks' pay. Ugh, I love universities. I do, actually. As I said, I do, actually. It's just a couple of them are annoying me at the moment. Thank you, everyone. Take care, and have a nice evening.